holiday park in Merseyside. And this is a fascinating story, this really, because there was local opposition to this, as there has been in many areas. And I am asking now, throughout the course of this show, you, the viewers, the listeners, whether or not you would back local referendums on migrant hotels. That's the question I'm going in with today. GBViews at gbnews.uk. Do you think there should be local referendums in your area if the Home Office plans to put a migrant hotel there? It is in light of the fact that Pontins holiday park is now not going to be used in Merseyside. It also comes as the Times can reveal, this is an interesting update on what's been going on in the channel, that people from India are now the third largest contingent of migrants who've crossed the channel in small boats so far this year. Harjap Singh Bangal joins me now. He's an immigration lawyer. Harjap, thank you very much. Great to have you on the show. Let's deal with first things first, really. When it comes to these migrant hotels, etc., the Pontins holiday camp, I think, was a visible symbol. That's now not going to be used in Merseyside. Do you think there's any case whatsoever that local residents should be able to have a vote on whether or not they want one of these hotels popping up in their area?
Well, essentially, yes. I think it's not a bad idea for the residents to have a say as to what goes on in the area. That's what they elect councillors for. That's what their MPs for. And people are free to lobby their MPs and councillors how they feel fit. But the reason we need to have a look at is how and why these hotels are popping up. It's because the asylum seekers aren't allowed to work. Otherwise, they can work and pay their own way, like everyone else does in the UK. However, the fact that we don't let them work, therefore they have to be housed by us and have to be paid for by us, that's what is the crux of the problem. If they were given a work until their claims are assessed, which we know can take up to 2 years, we would not have to pay for them to be housed. In fact, they can pay for their own rent and they can pay tax and help the economy.
One of the arguments against that, which I'm sure you're aware of, would be we are seeing distressing cases. Yes, they're a minority, but they are distressing cases nonetheless of people who are asylum seekers claiming to be refugees, etc., who've come over the channel, who've gone on to commit pretty heinous crimes. If our vetting procedure isn't good enough, then actually, realistically, it's not safe either, one would imagine, to essentially release them out into the community at large to work.
Well, like you said, it's a minority. But the fact is, if that was the case, we wouldn't allow prisoners to go out of prison and go back and be rehabilitated or join normal society again. The fact is that the majority of them aren't criminals, asylum seekers, despite what the media says. It's a very small minority, and we're always at liberty to keep them detained. But to keep people who are fit and able to work detained and pay for them and say, right, you can't work, we're going to pay for you, the British public is going to pay for you. When they're fit, able, they can work, they can get a job, they can pay tax and pay their own rent. It just doesn't make sense.
I do understand that. I think my point was a little bit more nuanced, Harjap, because in the case of an individual who we reported on earlier this week, we appeared unable to detect that he had been found guilty of a double murder, for example, in Serbia. We were unable to say that he'd been found guilty of drug offences in at least 2 European countries, as far as we can tell. And so I suppose if we don't know the backstory, that was more that I was getting at. Whereas, as you said, with prisoners, we do know the backstory. We know that they've been convicted of an offence over here and that maybe they can go through some rehabilitation plan. I mean, would you be against a local area saying, all right, well, if we vote on it and we vote for a migrant hotel, then we would also be happy to have people who are in that hotel working in our local economy?
Yeah, I mean, listen, the fact boils down to what people's complaint is about the amount we're spending on these hotels. I mean, that essentially is it, and why there is a need for it. The solution is to let the people staying in the hotels work, go and find their own job. To get a job, they need to clear a DBS anyway, and they need to clear a criminal record check. And the employer is responsible for them, for paying them. Yes, we don't know the backstory of everyone, but the fact is they're already here. It's a bit too late to discuss backstories when we've already let them in. So
no, indeed. And we are going to be returning throughout the course of this show to that Pontins Hotel in Merseyside anyway, which is now, as we understand it, not going to be used by the Home Office. There was local opposition to it, but frankly, there's been local opposition to plenty of areas. Some of them have caved, some of them have not. But can you just update me on the other, I suppose, breaking in a way, angle today, which is that supposedly Indians are now making up the third largest contingent of people coming across the channel. I was quite surprised at that, really. I mean, we give quite a lot of foreign aid to India. It's a massive economy, for example. Why are so many people now seeking to come across the channel?
It's not just now, Patrick. The Indians have been coming since the year 2000. They've always been in the top 5 groups. of migrants to the UK for the past 20 years. And they've also always been in the top 5 groups of people who overstay their visas. So we know that there's a problem with Indian people who come here under visas and overstay, and Indian people who are amongst groups of people crossing the channel. Our focus recently has been on Albania. However, you know, it doesn't mean just because Albanians at number 1, we need to ignore number 2, 3, 4, and 5. Indians have always been in there. Pakistanis, Bangladeshis, Sri Lankans, Afghans, Iraqis, South Americans. Even in the top 10, you'll find Australia and Canadian people overstaying their visas. And a lot of them is because they're unaware or ignorant. They just think because we've got a Canadian Australian passport, we can just stay here. And a lot of Brits do the same back over there as well. So overstayers...
that's the overstayers. I want to qualify that. No, I don't think many Brits are getting on a boat and going to Canada. If they do, fair play to them, to be fair, though. They could maybe deserve to stay.
Many overstay.
If they could do that, yeah, exactly. But, no, just when it comes to seeking asylum from India, if you are known to be an Indian national, I mean, can you really seek asylum from India? Do we not regard that as being a safe country?
Yeah, I mean, potentially we do. And however, anyone can claim asylum, and asylum by Indians is often used to frustrate getting removed here. This is all down to what we talk about every week, Patrick. The fact that the Conservative government has just stopped removing people and sending people back. Under Labour, which we traditionally see as being soft on immigration, we used to send back 30 to 35,000 people a year. That has dropped to recent years to the hundreds. Now, we need to get to the crux of that. Why can't this government send back 30,000 people and process their claims? It's because the claims are taking 2 years to decide, 2.5 years to decide. When they're decided, they're wrongly decided. So therefore, some people do take advantage of that. India as a whole does not have any problems. And if a person can get a visa to come here in the first place, they have to go through a rigorous process that doesn't show really a sign of somebody who's desperate to leave their country. If you sit around waiting for a visa.
Yeah, exactly that. I'm just going to give some numbers now to our viewers and our listeners. So around 250 Indian migrants arrived in the UK using the small boat method. That was in January. It exceeds the 233 who came in small boats in the first 9 months of last year. There's been an upturn, and I wonder, Harjat, whether or not this has got something to do with the noises coming out of this country and this government at the minute, that we're looking to clamp down on student visas. And a lot of that, I think, was targeted towards the Indian community, as it were. As you've said, quite high proportions there, using it as a backdoor entry into Britain, overstaying those visas. Maybe they've clocked onto that and thought, you know what, screw that, I'll come over the channel instead.
No, what's happening is a student visa from India, it makes up the largest proportion of visas granted. So it's quite easy to get if you've got the money. What's happening, these people crossing the channel are getting student visas into European countries, which are cheaper to get, i.e. Georgia, and, you know, looking at maybe Russia, other European countries, Latvia, Estonia. And from there, they're making the journey by road and coming over. As opposed to paying £15,000, £16,000 a year to get into a British uni, they can pay £6,000, £7,000 to get into a European uni, pay a couple of grand to the people traffickers, and get here for about 11 grand and claim asylum, saving themselves five, and getting in.
Yeah, just finally on that, Harjat, it does smack of Britain on a global stage, frankly, being seen as a bit of a soft touch. We know the people coming over from Albania, we know people coming over from a variety of different countries, which you've rattled off there. You've also said as well that we've got a high proportion of overstayers from Canada, from Australia. Indians now appear to be on the increase when it comes to the channel crossings as well. I mean, right around the world, people clearly are viewing Great Britain as being a soft touch when it comes to asylum and immigration.
I don't think it's viewing it as a soft touch, but the fact is, in practice, we haven't got our act together. I mean, we weren't a soft touch when we were sending back 35,000 people a year. But, however, we've become a soft touch because our system's broken. Once again, the Home Office doesn't know how many people actually leave the UK. We've only got entry controls. You know and I know, when we go at the airport, there's no immigration when we go out. So there's no exit controls. We don't know if anyone's come here, has gone back. And until this is all rectified, and until we have people in control of the Home Office who know what they're doing, and Home Secretaries who actually are true to their word, and a Prime Minister is true to their word, less noise, more action is going to get this done. Otherwise, we're going to be here in a couple of months saying the same thing. Well,
exactly that. I suspect we probably will, Harjat, but it will be a pleasure to see you again anyway. Harjat Singh Bangal, immigration lawyer. Just whizzing you through now, there's a lot to talk about, lots of different angles. Going to be picking them apart today. Look, The first one straight off the back is that Rishi Sunak, yet again, has vowed to be strong and increase deportations. He said that Rwanda flights will take off, flights like it will take off. Do you believe him? Do you not believe him? That's the first point there. We've heard it all before. We've also done a People's poll, which says now that the majority of you think we should leave the ECHR. That would make it, supposedly, more likely and make us more able to be able to deport people. Those two things would have to go hand in hand if anything like that is going to take place. More locally and more immediately, we've got the case of the Pontins holiday park, holiday camp in Merseyside, not being used now. It's on Southport, actually. Not being used now to house channel migrants, basically. That's a development. It was about to be. Now it's not. There was some public pushback, and that is leading me to ask the question I'll be asking you throughout this show, gbviews at gbnews.uk. Is it now time for local referenda when it comes to migrant hotels? I dare say you've got one in your area. Certainly this one located in the northwest. A lot of people are saying the north of England has taken a disproportionate number of these migrant hotels. In your area now, would you back referendum locally on whether or not you should have migrant hotels? And, of course, we'll be drilling down on the fact that there is a rise in Indian people coming over the channel as well. What is that all about? There we go. So loads to get stuck into there. We are going to go now, though, back to return to the story that we're doing at the top. There was that press conference, wasn't there? And in the last few moments, we heard from Lancashire Police on the continuing search for missing 45-year-old Nicola Bulley. Our national reporter, Theo Chicomba, was at that press conference, and I believe Theo joins us now. Yes, he does. Theo, thank you very, very much. What is the latest, then?
Good afternoon, Patrick. Well, it was a comprehensive press conference just a few moments ago with Superintendent Sally Riley, who gave some of the up-to-date details regarding this case and where the police are at. She spelled out some of the agencies they've been working with, many people involved in this search, including drones, helicopters, divers, pole cameras, search dogs, and they've been searching an area of around 15 kilometres down the river. And this includes the RNLI as well, and Coast Guard and other forces, including the air search and rescue. But they did word this. They said this is a working hypothesis. They're saying Nicola has fallen, no third party. This is not suspicious, and it's a tragic case of a missing person. So again, the search continues.
You know, my understanding is they're trying their very best to account for a missing 10-minute window, which doesn't sound like a lot of time, but clearly, frankly, is enough time for a mystery like this to occur, Theo.
Exactly. So they've got that time frame, which we've been hearing over the last few days. But as you say, there's that 10-minute time frame. They don't yet know where or what happened in that time. Interestingly, there was a question about her phone. They have cited saying she was last on her phone around 9:20. And they said through their investigations, through the system the police has, they were able to find out when she was last using her phone. But of course, that 10-minute window, and they are asking members of the public if they did see anything, please contact them. Interestingly, it was mentioned that around in that area there are gates which are locked, so they don't think she would have gone in that direction. And the other directions where there are alleyways to go back into the other areas in the local area, there's CCTV footage in that area, so they're saying it's possible that she remained in that area, and they believe she remained in that area where her dog and her phone were found.
Theo, thank you very, very much. We'll be going back to you at some point, I imagine, as well. That was Theo Chicomba there with the very latest from that press conference in relation to missing person, missing mother, missing dog walker, Nicola Bulley. Just again, quick up some there. A lot of questions were being asked before. We were all asking them here. I suspect you were at home as well. Is there no CCTV? Well, what the police are saying is there is, but only of a particular exit from the area that she was in. She's clearly not appeared on that. The other exit, I suppose you could say, appears to include locked gates, which makes it unlikely she will have gone anywhere. They are working off the hypothesis currently, as it stands, that Nicola has sadly fallen in to that river, and they have emphasised that they only cannot account for around 10 minutes of her movements, including the fact that she was on a conference call, or at least her phone was on a conference call at the time of her disappearance. The dog was there at the scene. It's not unusual for that dog not to have apparently been on a lead and been harnessed. And that, frankly, is the very latest. We will bring you more as we get it. They did also emphasise that they have used an unprecedented number of resources and continue to use an unprecedented number of resources. Moving on, you are with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News. Coming up, the rail network has been plunged into chaos yet again today as drivers strike for the second time this week. So is there an end in sight? More on that next. Remember as well, GBviews at gbnews.uk. Would you back a local referendum in your area relating to migrant hotels? But right now, we've got the weather.
Alex Deakin here with your latest weather update. The weekend is almost upon us and many of us will have a dry one. There will be some rain on Saturday and it'll be a cloudy and mild day, whereas Sunday turns a bit colder but much, much sunnier. Back to the rest of today. High pressure in control across the south. This weather front, though, has been chugging its way across northern Britain, still providing a little bit of rain here and there across the Pennines in particular and through the Northern Isles during this evening. But for most, it's dry, some drizzle at times in western areas, but I say most places not seeing any rain overnight. We'll keep a lot of cloud and that will keep things mild. Temperatures in the east may drop down to 4 or 5 Celsius, but for most of us, we start the weekend at 7 or 8 degrees. So a mild start to Saturday, fairly drab starts, but most places dry across England and Wales. Here's some rain coming in, though, initially to the northwest of Scotland, and then it will spread its way southwards towards Glasgow and Belfast by lunchtime, and then drifting towards Edinburgh across southern Scotland later on. The far northwest may turn a bit brighter later. For most of England and Wales, it will be dry, cloudy. Some breaks in the cloud, a bit of brightness coming through. It will be mild, double digits almost across the board. Some of that rain will push into northern England and North Wales on Saturday evening, but it's fizzling out all the while as it works its way further south, and that band of rain out of the way by Sunday. It is introducing colder air and clearer conditions as well. So the blue hue on the chart, it is going to turn frosty for much of northern Britain as we head into Sunday. So a very different day on Sunday. It will be a bit colder first thing with a frost, but a sparkling day of winter sunshine by and large. A bit of a breeze perhaps for Norfolk and at times across the Western Isles, but for most, light winds, plenty of sunshine. Temperatures won't be as high because we've got colder air coming in, but these numbers are about average for the time of year, and with light winds in the sunshine, it'll feel fairly pleasant. Enjoy your weekend.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison? I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit off.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions are, those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on.
He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one.
Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
He's the king of breakfast TV, and he's back. Eamon Holmes, back on the TV with me this morning.
Even remember my name.
I know, it's been 4 months. You have holy water by your bed?
Oh, yes. Already to bless.
Oh, Eamon. Oh.
Why do you not believe anything I say?
Eamon Holmes back on GB News Breakfast at 6 a.m.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance.
Now we're here to represent you.
Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
OK, welcome back, everybody. Now, the rail network has been plunged into chaos yet again today. You could repeat this pretty much, couldn't you, every single day of the week at the minute, as drivers strike for the second time this week. Members of the ASLEF and RMT unions have walked out over an ongoing dispute over pay and conditions. Services have been severely disrupted, with little to no trains running in some parts of the country. And operators say strike action may also affect services on Saturday. So is there any end in sight? Let's go live now to our reporters Paul Hawkins, who's at Euston, and Jack Carson, who is in Birmingham. Paul, I will start with you. What's the situation where you are?
There was a picket line here earlier today, an ASLEF picket line, because today it's all about ASLEF. These are the train drivers on strike, and the vast majority of them are represented by ASLEF, a couple of hundred represented by the RMT as well. But this is about ASLEF's day of industrial action, the 8th day by ASLEF. Compare that to at least 3 weeks of striking by the RMT, considerably less. ASLEF are really unhappy with the deal that's been put on the table by the rail delivery group. They're the people who represent the rail operating companies. They've been offered a 4% backdated pay rise, 4% next year. There are also terms and conditions attached, which Mick Whelan, the General Secretary of ASLEF, says are unacceptable, and he told us earlier about how he feels the talks are going.
Quite deceitfully, the RDG put out a protocol which they led for a pay offer over 2 years that hadn't been discussed with this trade union, hadn't been through the framework agreement that we'd agreed with them to allow some sort of national talks to take place in our fractionalised industry, and it's probably set the whole process back months and months. If they want to negotiate via the media, I'll tell you what I want, and then you can relay it to them. They can come and talk to us in a few weeks' time. But we don't behave like that. We behave honourably. So we'll go back into talks on Tuesday in the hope that trust can be rebuilt and we can find a way forward.
So Mick Whelan, as you've heard there, he's pretty angry, and there seems to be a significant gulf between ASLEF and the rail delivery group who represent the rail companies. He thinks that more strike dates are likely to be announced, he said. Bear that in stark contrast to the RMT, by the way, who are considering, they haven't said no, they're considering a deal that's been put on the table by the Network Rail, the Rail Delivery Group and the government. That's similar to the one that's been offered to ASLEF, but with a slightly higher pay increase. Mick Lynch, the General Secretary of the RMT, saying that they put it to members. They're going to come back with an answer next week. So we may get a settlement next week from the RMT, but it seems like the talks will be ongoing between ASLEF, and this certainly isn't the end of the industrial action as far as ASLEF is concerned. In terms of public opinion, a couple of days ago, a YouGov poll, it is just one poll, but one poll suggested that there is between 40 to 52% public support for rail strikes. Compare that to striking staff within the NHS, where public support is hovering around about 60-65%.
Yeah, indeed, Paul, and thank you for contextualising it like that. Yes, those opinion polls are very, very important when it comes to the strikes, because I suppose, realistically, they've got to try and bring the public on side with them a little bit as well. Jack Carson's in Birmingham for us. Jack, what's the situation where you are?
Well, Patrick, like many stations across the country, there were absolutely no services at all from Birmingham New Street today, but the picket lines were well attended at the 4 different corners of this station and also as well at the other 2 stations here in the Birmingham city centre. I spoke to some picket line members on the picket line at the Birmingham Moor Street, and they were telling me the specifics around working conditions. Of course, we hear that term bandied around a lot about working conditions and how ASLEF aren't happy with the conditions that have been put forward, but one of the members on the picket line was telling me how it can be so specific for each different train operating company, which is why it can be so complex, because some companies have things in there with certain things for drivers in their contracts, other companies don't, and so he said to me it can't be a one-size-fits-all deal in order to, of course, have this accepted by all of the members for the ASLEF union. But with the RMT, we know that this dispute is ongoing, particularly with Network Rail. Of course, the deal that Paul was alluding to there was a 5% backdated pay rise for 2022 and a 4% pay rise for 2023. Of course, that was initially rejected by Mick Lynch because of the red lines that they've got around driver-only trains and wanting guards on board the trains. Of course, the 5% for last year and 4% for this year was the Network Rail's best offer. They've gone back with that same offer in terms of pay, but of course that red line that the RMT have got, what's happened is the Network Rail have removed that disbandment of driver-only trains, and so the RMT are considering that now. There are a lot. They seem to be considering it the executive and possibly putting it, of course, to the members as well. For Network Rail and for the rail companies, in general, we know how much they're struggling after the pandemic. They're trying to, of course, reflect the rising cost and inflation, but also trying under the pressure to save money. We know Network Rail are planning to cut 1,900 jobs as part of its reworking with its maintenance teams, although the RMT disagreed that some of the changes and of course want a guarantee there's going to be no compulsory job losses. But for passengers here today, there's been absolutely no services, and this disruption is going to continue tomorrow when of course passengers come back to the railways.
Yes, indeed, Jack, thank you very much. Paul Hawkins there and Jack Carson as well, whizzing you through the latest on the rail strikes. They gave you the numbers, they gave you the public opinion. We'll be returning to that very, very shortly. After the news, I'm going to be talking about Dominic Raab, that's right. Do you really buy all of these bullying allegations? I'm not sure, but hey, people say with some 24 complainants, there's no smoke without fire. Do you think it's part and parcel of trying to run a very, very tight ship under very difficult circumstances? Is it unacceptable? And yes, I'll also be asking you whether or not you would vote if you had a referendum on a migrant hotel in your area. All that coming your way and much more after the headlines.
It's coming up to 3:34. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB newsroom. Lancashire Police, investigating the disappearance of a missing mother, says their main working hypothesis is that she fell into the River Wire. Nicola Bulley disappeared a week ago while walking her dog, and police say there's a 10-minute window that's unaccounted for. The 45-year-old's phone was found on a bench with her dog nearby. Superintendent Sally Riley confirmed a 1-kilometre radius has been searched around that location, along with a 15-kilometre stretch downstream.
Our main working hypothesis, therefore, is that Nicola has sadly fallen into the river, that there is no third-party or criminal involvement, and that this is not suspicious, but a tragic case of a missing person. This is particularly important because speculation otherwise can be really distressing for the family and for Nicola's children.
A man who was carrying a crossbow on the grounds of Windsor Castle on Christmas Day in 2021 has admitted trying to harm Queen Elizabeth. 21-year-old Jasvant Singh Chahal pleaded guilty to 3 charges, including an offence under the Treason Act. His crossbow was loaded with bolts, with the safety catch released and ready to fire. The late Queen was in residence at the time. And disgraced pop star Gary Glitter has been freed from jail after serving half of his 16-year sentence for sex offences. The 79-year-old, who had a string of hits in the 1970s, was jailed in 2015 for sexually abusing 3 schoolgirls. The sex offender, who left a low-security prison in Dorset earlier, will now be subject to licence conditions.
TV, online and DAB Plus radio. This is GB News. Don't go anywhere. Patrick will be back in just a moment.
He's the king of breakfast TV and he's back. Eamon Holmes back on the TV
Surprised
with me this morning.
Even remember my name.
I know, it's been 4 months. You have holy water by your bed?
Oh yes,
Oh, good.
already to bless.
Oh, Eamon. Oh.
Why do you not believe anything I say?
Eamon Holmes back on GB News Breakfast at 6 a.m.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even some ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Click that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions are, those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on.
He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one.
Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. I'm just going to get stuck into the inbox at the moment. GBviews at gbnews.uk. Lots of you have answered my calls to get in touch. When it comes to whether or not you would have a local referendum for housing these migrants, it's in light of the fact that a Pontins in Southport in Merseyside is now not going to be used by the Home Office to house some asylum seekers. Vanessa says, I live in Ainsdale and thankfully the plan to place asylum seekers in Pontins has been stopped. Southport relies on tourism and filling holiday accommodation with asylum seekers would impact the local area negatively. Anyone who enters the country illegally like this clearly has no respect for the law. Now, that, of course, is the view of Vanessa. But, yes, interesting when you look at the local economic angle, isn't it, realistically? If that particular part of the world, Southport, I know it quite well, actually, Southport, they will rely a lot on local tourism at that Pontins, and if it was going to be disused, then, yes, the only people who would benefit would be the people who owned the Pontins, and, of course, the people staying in it. David says, the situation is now becoming ridiculous, with information now obtained that many legal immigrants are of Indian origin. There is no reason that they should not be returned to their home country. As is the case with Albanians, the migrants are clearly economic migrants, not fleeing persecution, and should not be able to claim asylum. That is the other little bit of news that broke today, which is about the numbers of people crossing the Channel now increasing when it comes to people from India. They now made the third largest cohort of people crossing the Channel. Some 250 came in January alone. That's up from 233 that was in the first 9 months of last year. So that is a trend that has been identified. And I think a lot of people will maybe echo that individual's views there when it comes to India being a safe country. Just one more quickly. Mark says, hi, Patrick, the British government should build the countries that they are from. Well, good luck with that. Instead of making it the burden of the taxpayers. Right, keep your views coming in, because I have been asking as well about whether or not you should have a local referendum if you feel you have the right as a local taxpayer to have a local referendum on it in that area. I think it will be a good way of identifying which areas want them and which don't, and maybe putting a bit of pressure on the government as well. If there was basically a blanket part of the UK that said, no, we don't want them, then, frankly, it would maybe make the government do a bit more about it. But there are fresh allegations against, talking of the government, Deputy Prime Minister Dominic Raab today after an anti-Brexit campaigner alleged that he launched an abusive attack on her. So it comes amid reports the Cabinet Secretary Simon Case was personally informed of a written complaint against Raab months before Rishi Sunak reappointed him as Justice Secretary. A lot to talk about here, and with me to do it is GB News' political reporter, Catherine Forster. Catherine, thank you very much. Hot water for Raab.
This is just going on and on, isn't it? And it seems to be getting worse and worse for him, and you do wonder how long this will continue. I mean, Adam Tolley KC is investigating. He was appointed at the end of last year. At that point, there were only 2 formal complaints. There's now 24 people have officially complained. He's interviewed about 40 people. Many of the people are backing up basically what their colleagues have said. And then we've got Gina Miller, the anti-Brexit campaigner, wading in, saying that he was bullying and abusive to her in a conversation that happened when they were on broadcast together in 2016. Also that he shouted at a runner to go and get me a car. And, yeah, so, I mean, he is still saying he's done nothing wrong.
Yeah. Well, he is still saying that he's done nothing wrong, absolutely. Just remind me a little bit of this Gina Miller case, the ins and outs of it. I happen to know Gina Miller. She's a very robust individual. I wouldn't naturally imagine that she was the kind of person who could be bullied, really, but she's saying it happened on a broadcast, is that right?
It was after they'd been appearing on something together. I think it was in the run-up due to the Brexit referendum, and it was off-air afterwards, and he said to her something along the lines that, I can't make out if you're basically just really rich or stupid or something along those lines.
OK.
Not very nice. I mean, I don't know whether that constitutes bullying, certainly unpleasant, but then that he was also horrible to this runner, and she regards this as bullying, misogynistic behaviour.
I mean, it is fascinating, isn't it? Because there's a lot of elements to it. Certainly one of them is, what did Rishi Sunak or Simon Case know about these allegations and how credible they were or otherwise when they're appointing Raab, when they're maintaining his appointment? That is a big question mark, and it kind of reared its head a little bit. Different case, of course, with the Zahawi incident, but what did they know before? It does also open up serious questions about what is bullying, as we were alluding to earlier, and whether or not an individual who is elected by the taxpayer to do a very high-pressure, serious job has a right maybe to speak firmly to individuals who he may believe are dragging their feet. Let's deal with the first things first and discuss what they knew when they appointed Dominic Raab. Were they aware?
Well, it's become clear, Downing Street are holding very firmly to the line that Rishi Sunak hadn't been told of any formal complaints. But it's now emerged today that the Cabinet Secretary, Simon Case, had been personally informed of a written complaint months before Dominic Raab was appointed by Rishi Sunak. So then the question is, did Simon Case fail to inform Rishi Sunak? Now, they're not saying. At the lobby briefing at lunchtime, the Number 10 spokesman was saying Rishi Sunak has full support, full confidence in Simon Case. Is this his fault, or was Rishi Sunak told more than they're letting on? All these questions, because, of course, he came in saying he promised integrity, accountability, transparency, etc. And here we are. He already lost Gavin Williamson. Nadine Zahawi, at least that was dealt with relatively fast. But this has been dragging on for weeks and weeks, and there's no clarity about when this is going to be concluded, and it's massively damaging in the meantime.
Do we know anything about the specifics about what Dominic Raab has been accused of? Because, look, there may well be now old-school divas that they used to be in the music industry who have shouted and sworn at runners as they shouldn't have done, who are probably now bricking it. They're waiting for the lawsuit to come their way about bullying in the workplace and all this stuff. Is there any indication that what he's done, or alleged to have done, is actually anything other than maybe a boss with a short fuse?
Well, it's a grey area, isn't it? And he has been known as a very difficult boss for a long time, but where does that tip in to bullying? You're quite right. I mean, there was the ridiculous thing about a tomato being thrown across a room. But last week, there were some very specific bits revealed, which were including that people had been so traumatised that they'd literally been vomiting before they went into meetings, that they'd sought counselling from their GP, that they'd basically had to give up the job because they couldn't cope with it, and also that apparently one person at least contemplated suicide as a result. So some quite serious
It's a pass in there.
allegations. But yeah, I mean, Dominic Raab is absolutely adamant that he has done nothing wrong, and his team are saying, yes, he's a tough boss.
Yeah.
He has high standards. But I do think the number of people that have come forward, and of course there's been suggestions that basically civil servants want rid of him because they don't like some of the things that he might be trying to push for.
Yes.
But 40 people is a lot of people to say we have concerns.
It is a lot.
about his
As it
behaviour.
stands, still there, not going anywhere. Rishi Sunak, full confidence in Simon Case, the individual who was basically doing the quality control initially when they appointed Raab. So that's where we are at the minute, and it rumbles on.
It rumbles on. I mean, Dominic Raab might decide to stand down temporarily. It's becoming a massive distraction, but he hasn't so far, so...
No, he hasn't. No, he hasn't. Look, it's an interesting one. Look, Catherine, thank you very much. Catherine Forster there. Certainly not wanting to take anything away from anyone's lived experience. And, of course, bullying in the workplace is absolutely abhorrent. A lot of people are saying, well, hang on a minute, he has got a very, very tough job to do. The people expected a lot. And were there instances of civil service not getting on board with it? Look, it'll all come out in the wash, won't it, ladies and gentlemen? It will all come out in the wash. Now, moving on. Disgraced pop star Gary Glitter has been freed from jail after serving half of his 16-year sentence. The 79-year-old, who had a string of hits in the 70s, was jailed in 2015 for sexually abusing 3 schoolgirls. Our reporter Ray Addison is at the Verne prison in the Isle of Portland in Dorset. Ray, thank you for joining us. He'll now be subject to licence conditions, I believe.
Yeah, absolutely right, Patrick. He's 79 years old. The former pop star, disgraced paedophile, has spent the last few years at HMP The Verne. It's on the Isle of Portland in Dorset, and it's a low security category C prison. It specifically houses men who've been convicted of sexual offences. Now, Glitter, whose real name is Paul Gadd, was jailed in 2015, as you said, for sexually abusing 3 schoolgirls. 2 of the girls were aged 12 and 13. This happened in the 1970s when he was at the height of his fame. He managed to isolate those 2 girls from their mothers and assaulted them backstage. His third victim was less than 10 years old. He attempted to rape her in 1975. Now, these offences came to light as part of Operation U-Tree as a result of the Jimmy Savile inquiry. In fact, he was the very first person that they arrested as part of that investigation. Of course, Glitter has a history of sexual offences against children. In 1999, he was jailed for 4 months when they found that he possessed 4,000 indecent images of children. In 2002, he was expelled from Cambodia as well amid reports of sex crimes allegations. And in 2006, he was convicted of sexually abusing 2 young girls in Vietnam. He ended up spending 2.5 years in jail there. Now, today he's been released automatically halfway through his 16-year sentence. I've been speaking to local people to find out what they thought of him being released early.
It seems a shame he was released early. So many of the prisoners seem to serve a fraction of their sentence. I've no doubt they behave and do what they should when they're in prison. But they play the system, they come out early, and then so often you read in the papers they're re-offended. And people must just wonder why they let them go. He should serve the 16 years. If that's what a judge felt he needed to correct himself, then that's what should happen. He should serve the full 16 years.
I think he should have stayed in for the 16 years, even longer, I think, against children. I think that's absolutely awful. I mean, I don't know the ins and outs of all of the prisons that are there, but this one I think is quite an easy one. I don't think it's been difficult for him. I think they should have made it a bit harder.
Now, as I said, the Verne prison is a Category C. Category C means that the men who are housed here are given training and the opportunity to develop skills so that when they leave, they can use those to resettle back into the community. Gadd will now be the subject of licence conditions. It means that he needs within 3 days to tell his probation officer where he's going to be living. If he wants to leave the country, he has to give 7 days notice. And if he starts a relationship with somebody who has children under 18 years of age, he also will have to inform them of that as well.
Ray Addison, thank you very much. Ray there at the Verne prison in the Isle of Portland in Dorset, just reacting to the fact that Gary Glitter is now back out and about, albeit with licence conditions. What do you make of that, ladies and gentlemen? I do a lot on this programme about soft touch, law and order, basically, and when it comes to the fact that he was sentenced originally to a very hefty time in prison, 16 years, and he's out in half automatically, yes, albeit with licence conditions. When you bear in mind some of the crimes that he's done, horrific crimes against minors, schoolgirls, in fact, do you think, realistically, this is actually the right thing? Are we a bit too soft on people like that? But we're moving on now because the Bank of England has suggested there may be some light at the end of the tunnel of gloom. That's right, forecasting a recession that may be less dramatic than previously feared. But it took the base rate of interest rate to a 14-year high yesterday at 4%, and it's certainly spreading fresh concerns for mortgage borrowers and the property market. Joining me in the studio right now to hopefully put a bit of an end to this doom and gloom and the misery merchants at the Bank of England is our business and economics editor. It's Liam Halligan with On the Money. Hit me with some good news.
I thought you were going to say, hit me with your rhythm stick, Ian Jury. You're probably too young to remember Ian Jury. So, look, it's been a really busy week, information coming from all angles. So let's just recap what the Bank of England did yesterday. I've got a graph here that I can show you, and GB News radio listeners will have to bear with me. So in the years before the COVID lockdown, if we can run the graph there, the Bank of England held interest rates below 1%. Then there's the COVID lockdown when they went even lower. And there you can see on the right of the screen, Patrick, 10 successive interest rate rises since pretty much the beginning of last year, the beginning of 2022, up to 4%, a 0.5 percentage point rise yesterday. So from 3.5 to 4, that is a 14-year high on interest rates. And that, of course, means about 30 to 50 quid a month on your mortgage payments for the average mortgage, which is proper money for pretty much all households. But at the same time, Patrick, the Bank of England also changed its growth forecast yesterday, and it went from being super gloomy, saying that we're going to have almost 2 years of economic shrinkage, crikey, to the idea that we're going to have only 1 year of economic shrinkage, the economy getting smaller. I mean, I think this is nuts, frankly, and that's a technical term. I don't see that happening at all. We've just had a business survey out from the Purchasing Managers Index, a very, very authoritative organisation, been putting out business surveys of opinion of business leaders literally for decades. And they see quite a sharp uptick in business optimism now. We've got a sense that, I've been saying for a long time that interest rates would peak at 4 or 4.25%. That's pretty much now what financial markets think. As of today, you had words from the Governor of the Bank of England yesterday saying that inflation has turned the corner. We remain vigilant. But unless things change, we're probably not going to raise interest rates anymore. So it may even be that 4% is the peak, let alone 4.25%. Still painful for a lot of people with mortgages, but far, far, far better than almost anyone could have predicted just a few months ago.
Why do you think that they are being potentially unnecessarily gloomy?
Well, I'm just writing about this for my Telegraph column this weekend, literally in between appearances here on GB News. And the OBR, the Office of Budget Responsibility, put out earlier, just a couple of weeks ago, hardly anyone noticed it in the media, they put out a kind of an assessment of their previous forecasts, right?
Right.
And get this, the OBR's borrowing total, right, for the tax year 2021-2022, the estimate they made in March 2021, which, the government would have, heeded and, we can only spend so much money, we can't do these tax cuts. It was £108 billion too high, right? They said they'd get about £39 billion from corporation tax. They ended up getting £60 billion from corporation tax.
Wow.
I think they're just being too gloomy. I think they're civil servants, and this is fair comment, they'll deny it, and I respect a lot of people in the OBR. I know a lot of these people. I was at university doing advanced degrees in economics with a lot of them. I just think they're so risk-averse, and we're almost locked into these gloomy forecasts. So you need politicians who are going to be responsible, who aren't going to try and do too much too soon, which no doubt Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng definitely tries to do too much too soon. But forecasts aren't destiny, Patrick. I personally think, and this is a personal view, that come the March budget, March the 15th, and we're in the run-up to that now, rather than raising corporation tax to 25% from the current 19%, I think we should keep it at 19%. Okay. And I think that would be a huge shot in the arm for British business. And I know that at the top of the government, some people are starting to say the same thing.
Liam, thank you very much, as ever. Good stuff, ladies and gentlemen. They're being too doom and gloom, aren't they? Right, that was Liam Halligan there, our economics and business editor. You're with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News. Loads more to come in the next hour. Make sure you stay with me, though.
Alex Deakin here with your latest weather update. The weekend is almost upon us, and many of us will have a dry one. There will be some rain on Saturday, and it'll be a cloudy and mild day, whereas Sunday turns a bit colder, but much, much sunnier. Back to the rest of today. High pressure in control across the south. This weather front, though, has been chugging its way across northern Britain, still providing a little bit of rain here and there across the Pennines in particular and through the Northern Isles during this evening. But for most, it's dry, some drizzle at times in western areas, but I say most places not seeing any rain overnight. We'll keep a lot of cloud, and that will keep things mild. Temperatures in the east may drop down to 4 or 5 Celsius, but for most of us, we start the weekend at 7 or 8 degrees. So a mild start to Saturday, fairly drab starts, but most places dry across England and Wales. Here's some rain coming in, though, initially to the northwest of Scotland, and then it will spread its way southwards towards Glasgow and Belfast by lunchtime, and then drifting towards Edinburgh and across southern Scotland later on. The far northwest may turn a bit brighter later. For most of England and Wales, it will be dry, cloudy. Some breaks in the cloud, a bit of brightness coming through. It will be mild, double digits almost across the board. Some of that rain will push into northern England and North Wales on Saturday evening, but it's fizzling out all the while as it works its way further south, and that band of rain out of the way by Sunday. It is introducing colder air and clearer conditions as well, so the blue hue on the chart, it is going to turn frosty for much of northern Britain as we head into Sunday. So a very different day on Sunday. It will be a bit colder first thing with a frost, but a sparkling day of winter sunshine by and large. A bit of a breeze perhaps for Norfolk and at times across the Western Isles, but for most, light winds, plenty of sunshine. Temperatures won't be as high because we've got colder air coming in, but these numbers are about average for the time of year, and with light winds in the sunshine, it'll feel fairly pleasant. Enjoy your weekend.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christys, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome along, wonderful people. It's just gone 4 o'clock. You're with me. news. And coming up, police have confirmed their main hypothesis in the case of missing mother Nicola Bulley is that she fell into a river in Lancashire. We'll bring you the latest developments on that next. It is just a remarkable mystery, isn't it, what's taking place there? In other news, the Home Office has shelved plans to house hundreds of migrants in a Pontins holiday camp. Now, is this local opposition actually working? I will be asking, should there be local referendums on migrant hotels? It's also emerged there's been an alarming rise in the number of Indian people crossing the Channel. We'll examine what's going on there. In other news, is Nicola Sturgeon finished? Rumours are swirling that her time might be up as SNP leader after her ridiculous gender identity policy caused uproar. Get in touch, gbviews at gbnews.uk. Simple, straightforward question for you today, ladies and gents, one that I know a lot of you have already got on board with and you will continue to do so. Should there be local referendums on these migrant hotels in light of the fact that the one in Pontins has been canned? But now, though, it's the latest news.
And good afternoon, it's 4:04. I'm Aaron Armstrong in the GB newsroom. As you've just been hearing, Lancashire Police investigating the disappearance of a missing mother say their main working hypothesis is she fell into the river. Nicola Bulley disappeared a week ago while walking her dog. Police say there's a 10-minute window that's unaccounted for. The 45-year-old's phone was found on a bench with her dog nearby. Superintendent Sally Riley confirmed a 1-kilometre radius has been searched from that location, along with a 15-kilometre stretch downstream.
Our main working hypothesis, therefore, is that Nicola has sadly fallen into the river, that there is no third-party or criminal involvement, and that this is not suspicious, but a tragic case of a missing person. This is particularly important because speculation otherwise can be really distressing for the family and for Nicola's children.
Earlier, Nicola's partner, Paul Ansell, said he is focusing on staying strong for their 2 daughters and hoped people would come forward with new information.
Every single scenario comes to a brick wall, every single one of them. And then all we're doing is sitting there going round and round and round, going through every scenario, and then go back to the first scenario again and do the whole thing again. And it's just all day long. That's all we're doing. That's all we're doing.
Well, the community is also coming together to help find the missing mortgage advisor. They're appealing for anyone with information to come forward, hoping images of Nicola will help jog people's memories.
All week there've been searches going on with the local community. Everybody's really kind of come together to try and do everything they can to find her and bring her home to her family.
It's just, we're keeping eyes out for dash cams, anyone that could possibly have been here this time last week.
I just feel like I've got to stand here and do my bit, even if it's just stood here holding a sign up.
A man armed with a crossbow has admitted trying to harm Queen Elizabeth in 2021. Jaswant Singh Chile was arrested on the grounds of Windsor Castle on Christmas Day carrying a weapon which was loaded with bolts, which the safety catch was released and it was ready to fire. The 21-year-old pleaded guilty to 3 charges, including an offence under the Treason Act. The late Queen was in residence at the time. The disgraced pop star Gary Glitter's been freed from jail after serving half of his 16-year sentence for sex offences. The 79-year-old, who had a string of hits in the 70s, was jailed in 2015 for sexually abusing 3 schoolgirls. The sex offender, who left a low-security prison in Dorset, will now be subject to licence conditions. The Royal College of Nursing has joined ambulance workers in Wales in cancelling planned strikes for next week following new pay offers from the Welsh Government. Rail services are being disrupted today, though, with train drivers walking out for the second time this week. RMT and ASLEF union members are demanding better pay, better conditions. Rail operators say there are severe delays with no trains running at all in certain areas. ASLEF General Secretary Mick Whelan says the union wants talks to continue to find a solution.
Quite deceitfully, the RDG put out a protocol which they led for a pay offer over 2 years that hadn't been discussed with this trade union, hadn't been through the framework agreement that we'd agreed with them to allow some sort of national talks to take place in our fractionalised industry, and it's probably set the whole process back months and months. If they want to negotiate via the media, I'll tell you what I want, and then you can relay it to them. They can come and talk to us in a few weeks' time. But we don't behave like that. we behave honourably. So we'll go back into talks on Tuesday in the hope that trust can be rebuilt and we can find a way forward.
The anti-Brexit campaigner Gina Miller has become the latest person to accuse the Deputy Prime Minister of bullying. She says Dominic Raab launched an abusive attack and was aggressive and intimidating during an encounter in 2016. A source close to the Justice Secretary, though, has described the claims as malicious and baseless, saying they were timed to jump on a political bandwagon. And the US Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, has postponed his trip to China after an alleged Chinese spy balloon was tracked flying across the United States. It's been described as a civilian airship by China, which the country claims has deviated from its planned route. Well, a decision was made by the US not to shoot it down because the debris could pose a safety risk. China says it will continue to maintain communication with the United States to properly handle the situation. And this is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now back to Patrick.
OK, welcome back. Now, police in Lancashire have revealed that they believe missing mother Nicola Bulley fell into the River Wyre. A major search for Ms Bulley continues after she went missing a week ago, but no trace of her has been found. This case has gripped the nation, mainly because it appears to be so mysterious. And, as yet, well, we're nowhere near to getting the answers that we all, and especially her family, and indeed her children, desperately, desperately want. Our national reporter, Theo Tricomba, is in Lancashire. He was at this press conference. Theo, what's the latest then? We're no closer to the answers, are we?
No, that's right. It's still a week on since her disappearance, and in the last hour or so we had a press conference where Superintendent Sally Riley from Lancashire Police spelled out what they've been doing over the last couple of days, talking about the number of agencies who are involved. It's a huge operation that's taking place here. The RNLI are involved, drone operators and many more who have been involved in this. And they said at the moment they are working on a working hypothesis, which is Nicola has fallen into the river just behind me, and no third party, and this is not suspicious. And they say it's a tragic case of a missing person, and they do say it is a working hypothesis as part of their investigations. Throughout the day, in the morning particularly, we saw some of her friends, but of course members of the community who've been out holding placards saying if anyone has any dash cam, please do get in touch and call 101. And we also heard from her partner, and this is what he had to say.
Our main working hypothesis, therefore, is that Nicola has sadly fallen into the river, that there is no third party or criminal involvement, and that this is not suspicious, but a tragic case of a missing person. This is particularly important because speculation otherwise can be really distressing for the family and for Nicola's children.
And just to correct there, that was from the press conference rather than from her partner. Just to add in terms of what's the latest at the moment, they believe that she was in this riverside area and that she didn't leave this area. And they're still looking to account for around 10 minutes during that time, around 9:20, when she was involved in a work meeting and her phone was found here while still in the meeting, but she was not here, but her dog was found here by someone who was passing by. And of course, they're also urging people not to speculate, but if they do have genuine information, please do get in contact with them, as they don't want the family to be in a situation where they may hear some wrong information. So they are saying the family has been given support by specialist officers, and they'll continue to do so throughout this investigation. The search is going to continue into the weekend. There's no time frame as of yet of how long this is going to go on, but they're saying their work continues here.
Yeah, exactly. Look, Theo, thank you very much for bringing us the very latest there and reporting from that press conference as well. Just an unbelievable case, this, really, when you think about it. This is the case of Nicola Bulley, the dog walker mother as well, of course, who went missing last week, a week today. She was out walking her dog, and it's vital that the police managed to figure out what happened in that missing 10-minute window. It doesn't sound like any amount of time, does it? Especially bearing in mind that her conference call and her phone was on, all right, her microphone was off and the video was off as well, but clearly she'd been taking part in that conference call. There was a lot of mystery originally surrounding the dog. Why was it off a harness? The police confirmed that actually it was not unusual at all for the dog to be off its lead, off its harness. Just quickly, before we round off the case of Nicola Bulley for this hour, police have still not found Miss Bulley, despite what they say is an unprecedented search, and that search has involved fingertip searches under the water, sonar, etc., and they are now quite confident she's not in that stretch of water, although they believe that's where she initially went in. They don't believe third-party involvement. They also say that potentially, and this is speculation, but it's come from the police, they admitted it was speculation, was that they suspect that maybe an issue with her dog led her to the water's edge, and then obviously whatever happened after that. Just a couple of quick details, again, to emphasise what they believe she was wearing at the particular time, in case anyone has seen anything. She was wearing an ankle-length black quilted gilet jacket, a black Engelbert Strauss waist-length coat, and that was worn underneath that, as well as Wellington boots. So obviously anyone with information there, please make sure you contact the police. It's 101 or 999. We're moving away from that now. More updates as we get them, though, of course. Rishi Sunak has vowed to deport migrants arriving in the UK without valid documents within days. So that's the quote there, within days. So far, we've had stop the boats, haven't we? Stop the boats, clear the asylum seeker backlog down to zero and deport them within days. It's bold stuff for Rishi Sunak. I suspect not many of you are, frankly, believing what he's saying, but we'll have to wait and see. The pledge comes after the government abandoned plans to house asylum seekers in a Pontins holiday park in Merseyside. There was local opposition. That is why I've been asking you, and you've been getting in touch in your droves, whether or not now you would back local referenda on whether or not migrant hotels should be in your area. It also comes as the Times have revealed that people from India are now the third largest contingent of migrants who've crossed the Channel in small boats so far this year. India, I think, a safe country. We even send them foreign aid, don't we? I find it quite strange that now we will be accepting lots of people from there in small boats. Heck of a long way to come as well, isn't it? Now, to get into all of this, I'm joined now by the Director of the Centre for Migration and Economic Prosperity, Stephen Wolfe. Stephen, I'll start with what I'm going in on anyway, which is about local referendums for migrant hotels. Do you think it's time for areas to put up or shut up? If you really do heart refugees, refugees welcome, big flags on the beaches and all of this stuff, get a vote on it in your area and those areas can have the hotels, because places like Pontins in Merseyside supposedly don't really want them.
Oh, I absolutely agree that there should be local referenda, because there's certainly places in the north, the northwest in particular, and those on the coastal areas of Northumberland and Lincolnshire that have got far more than their kind of need for their communities. They're the ones who have lots of these hotels are taking places in. But I don't see a great deal in the leafy suburbs of Suffolk or Hampshire or Surrey. So why not allow the people to know when these people are coming in to stay in a hotel, have a referenda, and if they say no, then it forces the Home Office to choose somewhere else. And if those people believe that they want to welcome refugees, they can let them.
Well, this is the thing, because I suspect what we'd see is a pattern emerging of certain areas, dare I say it, the Islingtons of this world, or some inner city areas, where there's a cabal of Guardianistas, and they'd all be in favour of it, and I'd say that's absolutely fine, because there's probably a higher population there as well, less reliant on tourism, less reliant on a seaside hotel or holiday park, and actually these people will be more easily absorbed into the area. But actually what we're seeing at the minute, I suspect, Stephen, is people who are the chattering classes around North London, they're able to sit back and swill their Chablis and say, oh, isn't it awful that we're putting them in these hotels? But actually it's the fair people of Skegness or Scunthorpe, or like we had here in Southport, who are actually bearing the brunt of this crisis.
Oh, absolutely. And the statistics and the figures are very clear that the vast majority of housing, whether it's under the companies that have got the contracts to house short-term accommodation for asylum seekers, or those moving them into slightly longer term into hotels, or indeed thereafter, when they're allowed to go into the communities where they're funded accommodation by councils, are in the poorer constituencies in the country. They're predominantly the Midlands and the North, not the South.
Yeah.
And so it would make eminent sense that where the vast majority of those people claiming to be welcoming refugees are in the south, you could take Brighton, for example, you could take here in this, as I said, those areas like Surrey, Suffolk, Hampshire, all of those should take them.
Yeah, indeed. Now, talking of people that we should take or otherwise, there has been an interesting increase in the number of people from India who have been arriving in small boats. 250 in January, they came across the Channel. That's compared with 233 who arrived in the first 9 months of last year. A marked increase, of course, and if we play that out, that will hit big numbers, indeed. Should we be refusing anyone from India asylum?
Well, I think they've got to be in the same category as Albania. It is a safe country. There is a reason why they're coming over here and wanting to stay, because predominantly a lot of them are getting a better education and a cheaper education, one that helps them with advantages when they go back. It's very interesting, though, Patrick, when you look at these numbers of Indian refugees. If you look at in the United States, those going across the borders now, coming up through Guatemala into Mexico, if you listen to the border forces of the United States, they are telling you that there is an increase of Indian citizens coming across into the United States through the southern borders. So there clearly is some form of strategy being used by people smugglers and those seeking to get advantages in Western nations.
Yeah, indeed. I did speak to an immigration lawyer earlier on, and what he said was what initially a lot of these people were doing, apparently, was trying to pay for rather expensive student visas in this country and then overstaying. He's saying now, potentially, they've recognised that they can save a bit of money, get a student visa in a poorer European nation, and then work their way through the continent and into Britain that way. He did also go on to say that, actually, we'd be amazed at the amount of people who overstay from places like Australia and, indeed, Canada, which does imply that on a global stage, Britain is regarded as somewhat of a soft touch. Just finally, Stephen, Rishi Sunak has said he I'm vowing to deport people within just a few days. Well, that would rely on actually leaving the ECHR, getting Rwanda flights to take off. He's also vowed to stop the small boats and to reduce the asylum seeker backlog to nil. Do you believe any of it?
Well, I believe he's got the intention to do it, and I understand from those people who work within government departments and the Home Office that there is a distinct pressure to try and achieve this. They're looking at retention of staff, changing technology and working on legislation. What I would like to see, Patrick, in order for him to achieve that, is what is the legislation that he's seeking to get through Parliament? Does it mean that we leave the European Courts of Human Rights, or is there going to be some shenanigans that allows us to stay in that, and they think that there is a way of returning these people who fail asylum to their countries? Will he get agreements with the biggest countries of Afghanistan, Iran, Iraq, Somalia, for example, to be able to return those people? And finally, if he can't do that and he wants to return them to the first safe country, he needs a massive deal with the European Union. When is that going to happen? So it is eyes open. I believe he has the intention, but I need to see the legislation before I believe that he can achieve this.
Stephen, thank you very much, as ever. Stephen Wolfe there, who is the Director of the Centre for Migration and Economic Prosperity. Look, lots of you have been getting in touch on this exact thought. Now, it's about migrant hotels. There's a few different areas that we can hit here when it comes to immigration, legal and illegal, into the country at the moment. The Pontins Hotel, which is in Southport, in Merseyside, was reportedly being looked at by the Home Office as an alternative to hotels. So it's more of... Everyone knows what Pontins is, don't they? I don't really need to hold your hand through that one. It's a holiday park in the northwest, OK? And people were saying, well, maybe this would be good. It's a bigger facility. It's a little bit more separate. But actually, clearly, a lot of residents and anyone who works in the local economy will say it is a massive draw for people. It helps with tourism. It helps with the wider economy. And people as well, and this all too often gets forgotten when people talk about migrant hotels, is all of these hotels and all of these holiday parks have staff, have people who work there. What happens to them? Well, they get the old heave-ho, don't they? And then Home Office officials and whoever else comes in. So people are being rendered completely unemployed as a result of our migrant hotels, as well as the local economy missing out. Well, look, local residents were quite angry about this. In the end, the Home Office appears to have backed down. I'm calling now for local referendums. I think enough is enough when it comes to this kind of stuff. A lot of places are taking the absolute brunt of it, and it's not your big, lovey, lefty areas that you would expect down south. They tend to actually get off almost scot-free. It's a lot of the places in the Red Wall, it's a lot of the places up north, it's a lot of the places in the northeast who appear to be doing more than their fair share when it comes to taking migrant hotels at a big cost to their local economy. And I want to know whether or not you would back a referendum in your local area on this. And frankly, I think it might give a lot of people quite a bloody nose, because they'd be able to paint a map of Britain, wouldn't they? We'd be able to say, well, actually, maybe now Britain has had enough of this and we want something to be seriously done about it. John says, my area votes to have if my area votes to have a migrant hotel within it, all the surrounding areas vote against, and a migrant living in my area travels around committing crimes. It's a ridiculous idea. Border control and migration for the government to manage, not individual villages, towns, boroughs and districts. Yeah, I understand that, but actually what's currently happening, John, I agree with you, by the way, but what is currently happening, John, and we can't get around this, is that your local area, including your local council, is not being informed before one of these hotels just pops up. And so at least this would give you somewhat of a say. Up to you there, John. Of course, we've got time for another one now, I believe. Who are we going to go to? Alex says, yes, we should be able to vote. The country is full up and we don't want them. That's Alex's view. Now, it's interesting this, because I think what should happen there is you will get pockets of this country that do. Well, why not house them there then? That might seem like a solution, realistically. Loads more to come on this particular show here. Patrick Christys on GB News. Coming up, rail workers have walked off the job again today, causing travel disruption around the country. So, when will the walkouts end? More on that very, very shortly. But before that, let's take a quick look at your weather.
Alex Deakin here with your latest weather update. The weekend is almost upon us and many of us will have a dry one. There will be some rain on Saturday and it'll be a cloudy and mild day, whereas Sunday turns a bit colder, but much, much sunnier. Back to the rest of today. High pressure in control across the south. This weather front, though, has been chugging its way across northern Britain, still providing a little bit of rain here and there across the Pennines in particular and through the Northern Isles during this evening. But for most, it's dry, some drizzle at times in western areas, but I say most places not seeing any rain overnight. We'll keep a lot of cloud and that will keep things mild. Temperatures in the east may drop down to 4 or 5 Celsius, but for most of us, we start the weekend at 7 or 8 degrees. So a mild start to Saturday, fairly drab starts, but most places dry across England and Wales. Here's some rain coming in, though, initially to the northwest of Scotland, and then it will spread its way southwards towards Glasgow and Belfast by lunchtime, and then drifting towards Edinburgh and across southern Scotland later on. The far northwest may turn a bit brighter later. For most of England and Wales, it will be dry, cloudy. Some breaks in the cloud, a bit of brightness coming through. It will be mild, double digits almost across the board. Some of that rain will push into northern England and North Wales on Saturday evening, but it's fizzling out all the while as it works its way further south, and that band of rain out of the way by Sunday. It is introducing colder air and clearer conditions as well, so the blue hue on the chart, it is going to turn frosty for much of northern Britain as we head into Sunday. So a very different day on Sunday. It will be a bit colder first thing with a frost, but a sparkling day of winter sunshine by and large. A bit of a breeze perhaps for Norfolk and at times across the Western Isles, but for most, light winds, plenty of sunshine. Temperatures won't be as high because we've got colder air coming in, but these numbers are about average for the time of year, and with light winds in the sunshine, it'll feel fairly pleasant. Enjoy your weekend.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance.
Now we're here to represent you.
Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. B, I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Now, the rail network has ground to a halt again today as train drivers strike for the second time this week. Members of the ASLEF and RMT unions have walked out over an ongoing dispute over pay and conditions. Services have been severely disrupted, with little to no trains running in some parts of the country, and operators say strike action may also affect services on Saturday. Is there any end in sight? With me now is someone who's supportive of the strikes. It's William Clouston there, who is the leader of the Social Democratic Party. William, look, great to have you back on the show, although I suspect we don't quite agree on this particular one. Why are you so in favour of these strikes? It would indicate, the polls would indicate that train drivers, for example, have the least amount of public support of any of the striking workers.
Well, the first point that, I don't want anyone to strike. I want a pay deal, and I want a national integrated railway system that works for everyone. But we shouldn't be surprised in a cost of living crisis, when housing costs and energy costs and food prices are going up, that workers want to retain their real pay and not take a real pay cut. And also, we shouldn't be surprised that unions back them and try and defend their interests. But I think what we've got now is actually madness. I think the government, a lot of our problems on this, Patrick, are caused by the structure of our railway system. You've got a Network Rail, and you've got the Rail Delivery Group, and you've got 15 separate rail companies, and you've got the government hanging around in the back. And frankly, and you've also got two unions who want slightly different things. So it's very complex. That structure doesn't help it. But actually, I'll just say it now, I think the government should have put pressure on last summer, because the RMT was asking for 7 or 8%. And they should have snapped their hands off and got the trains running.
Well, possibly with a little bit of foresight, maybe, but I think at that time we were still in even more chaos. The chaos has been never-ending. But just to recap on where we are at with the offers, as we understand it anyway, train drivers supposedly have been offered an 8% pay rise. It's not quite as it seems, actually. 4% backdated to last year, 4% for this year coming. The RMT staff supposedly 5% backdated to last year, 4% for this year. So very, very similar stuff. Public support hovering between the 40 and 52% mark when it comes to rail workers as a whole, though. Train drivers is much less. What do you think Mick Lynch or Mike Whelan would say if they said, all right, then, you've got a choice. We'll either give train drivers a pay rise or nurses?
I don't think it's helpful to set it off like that. I think every industry is different. And if you look at the RMT, we've got members of the SDP. Every single time this is on the news virtually, people say, well, ASLEF, train drivers get paid, £60,000. A lot of the RMT workers on the track are actually getting paid, high 20s or 30 grand. And as I say, every single situation is different. The teachers, for instance, had a pay rise last year. A lot of RMT workers haven't had a pay rise for 3 years.
Exactly.
I think we must be getting near to a solution, because it just makes no sense. As I say, I think that I've always said I think the RMT workers have a case here. If you just look at what their situation is, that's why I've tended to back them. But I think it's madness to continue with it, because the collateral damage, the wider collateral damage for the economy. This is an economy that is not going to grow pretty much this year. The hospitality industry lost out, estimated $1.5 billion last year with these things. It's just not worth it.
But and the rest as well, when it comes to all of the wider knock-on effects as well, not just in the hospitality industry, but throughout. Then you look at childcare. Now, it's becoming very easy for people like me, William, to, if I wanted to, which sometimes I do, make the case and go, well, you're all being very selfish now. If we really are all in this together and we really are all for the workers' rights, and it really is, as teachers would say, about the kids, and nurses and doctors or whatever would say, oh, it's really about the patients. Well, I can point now to numerous different examples where they have had a pay rise, they've been offered a pay rise. If they get that pay rise and everybody else does, then we bankrupt the entire nation and everyone suffers. I don't really think it is about all of the things they're claiming it is. It is just about the money in their pocket, isn't it? And that is selfish.
I'm on record. I think when you get, for instance, the nurses asking for 20% plus inflation-busting claims, and likewise the teachers, likewise, I haven't supported it. I think to ask for more than inflation in this environment is just not being realistic. I think, Sharon Graham of Unite was saying the other day that the money's there. Well, we've got the figures from December's deficit, and basically, we're what was it, 27 billion down. So the money isn't there. I mean, if you add to that debt, what you're doing is basically spending tomorrow's money today, and you can't do that. But on this, let's return to this question. The RMT asked for 7% last summer. They hadn't had a pay rise for 3 years, and I honestly think that's reasonable. I'll call out any union that I think is asking for something that is unreasonable. But in this case, I just think it makes no sense.
Yeah, I am very much in agreement with that, and I can completely believe that short-sighted, sticking plaster government policies is what ultimately has, in some senses anyway, led us to here. Just lastly, William, would you be in favour of Rishi Sunak? I mean, we were not short of briefings, were we, during the COVID pandemic? At one point, I'm pretty sure Boris Johnson called a press conference to remind the nation that we all have to put our pants on in the morning and make sure you take a shower. Don't forget to breathe if you still can, But now, I wonder whether or not Rishi Sunak should stand up and go, right, OK, here's what we've offered the teachers. We're absolutely not giving in to that. The average teacher's salary is this, and you can get around 28 grand in a lump sum if you start out in a certain sector of teaching. These are the sectors of striking workers that we're going to give a pay rise to, and we cannot afford to give anyone else a pay rise so you can just get back to work. And he just goes, your lower-paid nurses, your lower-paid members of the RMT, maybe teaching assistants, potentially, and he just tells everyone else to swivel and presents the nation with the numbers.
Well, in a way, actually, that's what he's tried to do. They tried to impose a 2% pay increase limit on all public sector workers. But as I say, it's very, very patchy. Different unions want different things. As I say, ASLEV's requirements are different to the RMT's. And, it's in the railway situation, you've got a very fragmented system. So who are you negotiating with? And the government isn't even involved, really. I mean, I wish the government were involved a little bit more. Every single industry and situation is a little bit different. If you've had a recent pay rise that's been reasonable last year, I think there's a less of a case. You can't suddenly ask for inflation-busting pay rise. It's just not reasonable, and the public know that.
Exactly, and I think most people at some point in their career, will have potentially, taken an offer for a job, and then 6 months or a year later thought, I wish I hadn't done that. I wish I pushed on. But that is a part of life. And I do get that the economic situation is bad. William, thank you very much. I could talk to you for a very long time, but I'm not allowed. William Clouston there, who is the leader of the Social Democratic Party. Just quite a reasonable approach in a sense there, I think, wasn't it? Certainly none of the radical tosh that we appear to be getting a lot of the time when we rake up union leaders from left, right and centre. Mostly left, though, of course. You're with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News. Now, a man who told police, I am here to kill the Queen, when he was caught carrying a crossbow on the grounds of Windsor Castle, has pleaded guilty to charges of treason. No, this isn't the Middle Ages, this is 2023. I will bring you much more on that next. But first, it's your latest headline.
Hi there, it is 4:33. I'm Aaron Armstrong in the GB newsroom. Lancashire Police investigating the disappearance of a missing mother now believe she fell into the River Wire. Nicola Bulley disappeared a week ago while walking her dog. Police say there's a 10-minute window that's unaccounted for. The 45-year-old's phone was found on a bench with her dog nearby. Superintendent Sally Riley confirmed a 1-kilometre radius has been searched around the location, along with a 15-kilometre stretch downstream.
Our main working hypothesis, therefore, is that Nicola has sadly fallen into the river, that there is no third party or criminal involvement, and that this is not suspicious, but a tragic case of a missing person. This is particularly important because speculation otherwise can be really distressing for the family and for Nicola's children.
A man who was carrying a crossbow on the grounds of Windsor Castle on Christmas Day 2021 has admitted trying to harm Queen Elizabeth. 21-year-old Jaswant Singh Chahal pleaded guilty to 3 charges, including an offence under the Treason Act. His crossbow was loaded with bolts, with the safety catch released and ready to fire. The late Queen was in residence at the time. Disgraced pop star Gary Glitter has been freed from jail after serving half of his 16-year sentence for sex offences. The 78-year-old, who had a string of hits in the 70s, was jailed in 2015 for sexually abusing 3 schoolgirls. Glitter left a low-security prison in Dorset and will now be subject to licence conditions. TV online and DAB Plus radio, this is GB News. Don't go anywhere. We will be back in just a moment.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Slightly unusual, but very serious story now, ladies and gents. A man who was caught carrying a crossbow on the grounds of Windsor Castle in 2021 has admitted trying to harm Queen Elizabeth. 21-year-old Jaswant Singh Chahal pleaded guilty to 3 charges, including an offence under the Treason Act. Not often used, the Treason Act. His crossbow was loaded with bolts, with the safety catch off, and was ready to fire. Now, the late Queen was in residence at the time. Joining me now in the studios, GB News' role reporter, it's Cameron Walker. Cameron, an unusual but serious case.
Very unusual, yes. In fact, I think the last person convicted under this particular Treason Act was in 1981, which gives you a sense of the history. But yes, picture Christmas Day 2021, the late Queen, which turned out to be her last Christmas, and members of her family were in Windsor Castle, about to start enjoying their Christmas festivities, when at 8:10, a man was arrested in the grounds of Windsor Castle, having just told police officers that he was there because he intended to kill the Queen.
Right.
So Jaswant Singh Chahal, who's 21, today at the Old Bailey pleaded guilty to 3 charges, the first of which is probably the most serious, Section 2 of the Treason Act, for willfully producing a loaded crossbow with the intent to injure or alarm Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. The second charge he pleaded guilty to was making a threat to kill, in this case, the Queen.
Yeah.
And the third charge was being in possession of an offensive weapon, in this case, a loaded crossbow in a public place. The prosecution went on to say the loaded crossbow was loaded with a bolt. The safety catch was off. It had very much had the capacity to cause serious injury or a fatal injury. So Jaswant Singh Chahal allegedly scaled the perimeter fence at Windsor Castle using a nylon rope ladder, 2 hours actually before he was arrested. But when he was challenged by police with the taser, he very quickly dropped his weapon and dropped to the floor and was subsequently arrested. Now, just before he entered the grounds, he sent a video to around 20 people where he announced his intention to attempts to assassinate Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. He said in this video, he allegedly sought revenge against the British Empire for treatment of Indians. This clearly very serious offence. He entered the pleas from via video link from Broadmoor Psychiatric Hospital. The judge has ordered for a psychiatric report to be carried out and him to receive it by the end of this month. He's due to be sentenced at the Old Bailey on the 31st of March.
Indeed, and quite concerning in the sense that, from what I gather there, he was roaming around for a little while before he was caught.
That would appear to be the case, yes. However, when he was challenged by a police officer, it was very quickly dealt with. Clearly, there are lots of protection at royal residences, particularly when the sovereign is in residence.
Yes, indeed. Cameron, thank you very much. As ever, Cameron Walker there, our royal reporter. Right, now, moving on from that, disgraced pop star Gary Glitter has been freed from jail after serving just half of his 16-year sentence. The 78-year-old, who had a string of hits in the 70s, was jailed in 2015 for sexually abusing 3 schoolgirls. Our reporter, Ray Addison, is at the Verne prison in the Isle of Portland in Dorset. Ray, thank you very much, and lots to talk about here. His early release, as it were, in a way, and also his licence conditions.
Yes, absolutely, Patrick. He was freed, as you said, from the Verne earlier on today after serving just 8 years of a 16-year sentence. He was freed automatically because he'd served half of that time. Now, the Verne is a low-security Category C prison. It houses specifically and only men who've been convicted of sexual offences. Now, of course, Glitter, whose real name is Paul Gadd, had been there since 2015. He'd been jailed for sexually abusing 3 young girls. The attacks took place in the 1970s when he was at the height of his glam rock fame. Now, the 2 of the victims were aged 12 and 13. He managed to get them backstage at an event. He isolated them from their mothers and carried out the attack. His 3rd victim was aged under 10 and he attempted to rape that child. Now, these offences came to light as part of Operation U-Tree, which was conducted following the Jimmy Savile scandal. He was the first person to be arrested. Not surprising, perhaps, on account of his string of previous offences. In 1999, he was jailed for 4 months here in the UK after being found in possession of 4,000 indecent images of children. In 2002, he was expelled from Cambodia after reports of sex crimes there. And in 2006, he was convicted of sexually abusing 2 young girls in Vietnam, and he served 2.5 years in prison. As I said, today he was released after 8 years. I've been speaking to local people about how they feel about his release.
It seems a shame he was released early. So many of the prisoners seem to serve a fraction of their sentence. I've no doubt they behave and do what they should when they're in prison. But they play the system, they come out early, and then so often you read in the papers they're re-offended. And people must just wonder why they let them go. He should serve the 16 years. If that's what a judge felt he needed to correct himself, then that's what should happen. He should serve the full 16 years.
I think he should have stayed in for the 16 years. Even longer, I think, against children. I think that's absolutely awful. I mean, I don't know the ins and outs of all of the prisons that are there. But this one I think is quite an easy one. I don't think it's been difficult for him. I think they should have made it a bit harder.
Now, Category C prisons offer the inmates the chance to learn skills so that they can attempt to resettle back into the community once they've been released. Now, we obviously have no idea where Paul Gadd is now or what he may wish to do now that he's been freed. Whatever happens, he will be on licence, he'll have a probation officer, and he will be under very strict conditions, Patrick.
Right. Thank you very, very much. Ray Addison there reporting from the Verne prison in the Isle of Portland in Dorset in relation to the fact that Gary Glitter has got out after serving half of his sentence. And when Ray was outlining the length and breadth of his rap sheet from before as well, and some of the heinous, hideous attempted crimes and indeed crimes against children as young as 10 years old as well, in one case that Ray was outlining there, it does make you wonder, doesn't it, why on earth these people ever walk the streets again, as was echoed by plenty of people that Ray was talking to, ordinary members of the public, wasn't it? Will people like Gary Glitter ever not be a threat? And do we need to take that chance with them? Anyway, right, we're moving on from that now. And it's time for GB News' People's Poll. Nothing like a little bit of exclusive content, is there? This week, we've been asking if the UK should leave the European Convention on Human Rights to control immigration. So are we getting out of the ECHR? A total of 38% of you agreed that we should leave the ECHR. 23% said they completely agreed. 15% somewhat agreeing. So whilst a total of 32% of you disagreed about leaving the ECHR, 5% somewhat disagreed and 27% completely disagreeing. So there we go. Right, the ECHR has proved to be a substantial roadblock in our government's efforts to deport people who've come to this country by illegal means. And, of course, has led to plans as well. What are foreign judges doing meddling in our systems? Why have we got some chap from Slovenia or wherever telling us that we must keep this individual in our country? What about our human rights over here? All of these lies. Anyway, with today's news that plans for migrants to be housed in a Pontins in Southport have been shelved, I want to ask if it's time for local areas to be given referendums on whether asylum seekers can be housed in hotels near them. I've been asking you, the wonderful people at home, throughout the course of this show. Loads of emails have come in on that. gbviews@gbnews.uk. Should we now have local referendums, area by area, constituency by constituency, however you want to do it, on whether or not we should have asylum seeker hotels in those areas? Joining me now is political commentator Suzanne Evans and John Fouch, the North of England coordinator of Rejoin EU Party. Great stuff, both of you. Thank you very much. Suzanne, I will start with you. Do you think that there should be local referendums when it comes to having asylum seeker hotels?
I absolutely do, yes. I mean, it's quite interesting, isn't it? I actually think we should have more referenda on all sorts of things, to be honest. But here we have basically a failure of national government to control immigration being foisted on local communities. And understandably, if you have whole hotels, which may have hundreds of bedrooms taken over by a particular type of person in a particular locale, that is massively going to alter the whole community makeup of an area. So, yes, I absolutely think there should be local referenda. This becomes a local issue. As I say, it's a failure of national government, but it becomes a local issue, and therefore local people should surely be allowed to have a say.
John, I'll throw it your way. I am aware that I appear to have come dressed as one of your EU flags today, actually, which is rather poor timing, but there you go. John, when it comes to the local referendums idea for asylum seekers, don't tell me you'd be happy to have a referendum, but you'd want to keep having one until you got the answer you want.
I'd be quite happy for them to have referendums, but only on the basis of facts and well-established facts. And when the referendum is set out in a way that they've already explored the avenues, it can tell you exactly what's going to happen.
OK.
Now,
all right, in this case, I take your point, yes. In this particular case, then, if it was pretty straightforward, do you or do you not want a migrant hotel in your constituency? Do you think local constituents have a right to vote on that?
Absolutely, yes, but only on the basis of real facts. We don't want a repeat of the Brexit fiasco with all the lies that were told.
OK. Would you be in favour of us leaving the ECHR, John? I'll maintain.
No, absolutely not.
Right.
And I think if you look at your poll, you've got a majority in the single categories for not leaving the ECHR, 27%. And in fact, if you look at your numbers, you haven't got a majority to leave. You've got about a third each way. A third don't know, a third want to leave, and a third want to stay.
Yep, Suzanne, no, there are the numbers for people that can see it now. I'm just going to reiterate those numbers. So completely agree, 23%, somewhat agree, 15%, somewhat disagree, 5%. So we can do this all day. Completely disagree, 27%. Prefer not to say 7%. So it's almost as close as the actual initial referendum to begin with. Suzanne, would you leave the ECHR? Because Rishi Sunak, from where I'm sitting, basically saying, well, we want to stop the boats, we want to reduce the asylum seeker backlog to nil, and also as well, I vow that I'm going to deport people within a few days of arriving here. Well, he can't do it, Suzanne, can he, if we're still in the ECHR?
Well, that's the problem, isn't it? And I have to say, you know, I've thought about this long and hard, and I think I'd be in favour of leaving the ECHR now. I think that's what we should do. I don't wish to reiterate the whole Brexit referendum campaign again, but we did vote to take back control, and there was a clear majority voting to take back control, and yet, of course, we haven't in so many ways. And the government, of course, has also not taken advantage of the Brexit dividend that it should have done. But I'm actually quite surprised by the GB News People's Poll. I thought that more people would be strongly in favour of leaving the ECHR, seeing as how I think it is pretty evident to most people that it has severe flaws, that very often, for instance, put criminals and illegal migrants before victims and before people who have been born and bred in a particular country. So I'm quite surprised, and I think it actually is quite good for GB News that it shows a broad representative of viewers, because if you ask Conservative voters whether they think we should leave the ECHR, 68% think we should. So you obviously have a much more broader viewer support than perhaps some people like to make out.
Yes, I mean, don't want to take the gloss off this, Suzanne, because that was a wonderful little bit of PR for GB News there, but we do outsource these polls to a company, so it's a fair demographic of the entirety of Britain. So there we go. But yes, I will take any credit that we can get. John, why should I have here now a judge from Slovenia, Montenegro, wherever, now to tell us that we shouldn't be able to deport someone who we have no idea whether or not they committed a double murder in Serbia or convicted of drug offences in Italy and Norway. Well, surely we can
no longer can see that information because you've left the EU. You've left the system that allowed the police to know this kind of information.
But the ECHR
Brexit has taken this information away from you and made you unable to take a decent decision because you can't access it.
But why were the countries that were in the EU then not themselves able to see that about each other? It clearly wasn't working, John.
Yes, they can.
But they didn't. Italy didn't know about Norway. Norway didn't know about Italy. This particular chap was allowed to walk through at least 5 different European countries before getting on a boat in Calais. I'm not surprised they were perfectly happy to wave him off, by the way.
You get free travel. You don't get stopped at the borders. They get checked afterwards.
So the compromise, I suppose, as far as you're concerned, for us, maybe having been able to find out whether or not this guy slaughtered 2 fellow asylum seekers in Serbia would be to live under a system that would have allowed him to just walk freely through it to begin with.
So what is the difference between a Slovenian murderer, a French murderer, or a British murderer? Nothing. They're all murderers.
2 of them
have been born in a different place. What's the difference?
The difference is that we don't want them in our country, and at the moment, it's much more difficult to get them out of our country once they're already here.
John, you're saying who is we?
That's why things need to change.
All right, John, you are saying who is we. Do you want a load of foreign murderers in Britain?
I don't want a load of murderers anywhere.
So we don't want
British murderers. There's far more British murderers on this island than foreign murderers. Why don't you get rid of them first?
Yeah, we are in Britain, though. We are in Britain, though.
We're not allowed to. They're British. That's a totally different... I'm sorry, that's a really silly argument.
Why is it different?
Suzanne, why
because
is it different?
If you have British nationality, where are they supposed to go? Where are we supposed to send them? That's not the issue, is it?
As you very well know. Why not?
Well, interesting stuff.
You want to turn today's when we send criminals to Australia? Is that what you're advocating? Or that doesn't sound like
we have done in the past. Remember, the UK were the ones who invented concentration camps. In South Africa, where we put women and children and left them to starve and die of typhus, whilst the soldiers were feasting outside through the barbed wire fence.
And that is precisely, surely, a world we do not want to return to.
Yes, no, exactly that. I'm just going to gently nudge...
You're talking about doing something about murderers, and I see no difference between a European citizen or an African or an American or a Brit.
John,
we're all human.
Okay.
Right, impressive powers, John, impressive powers of deflection. With respect, you do know full well that we are talking about whether or not we should have tighter securities for people coming over the channel, and it would be rather nice if we did not have potential murderers, etc., coming over.
What? How do you achieve that? I can tell you how you achieve that. Reopen the legal routes for people to come to the UK, assess them when they're here, instead of cutting the budget and not bothering to assess them, which is where the whole problem has come from. The government have decided to close all the routes that they can use. So guess what? They're left with just the boats.
Well,
they wouldn't risk
but John, yes, again, I'm sorry, but that's willfully not true, is it? We've had more than 100,000 Ukrainians. We've had 250,000 Hong Kongers. Suzanne, just quickly,
yes,
if you were given...
You've allowed it to
John,
certain
that's
countries,
enough,
not for
John.
others.
You've
Why
had
are
quite
you
enough.
making decisions?
Suzanne, very quickly, if you had a vote about a migrant hotel in your area, which way would you vote, Suzanne? If you had a vote
If I had a vote in my area, yes, I would. We have actually one big hotel has been taken over, one of the oldest hotels in the town, and people here are very unhappy about it.
Yeah, so you would vote against. All right, John, would you vote for a migrant hotel in your area? Quickly.
Absolutely. I live in Bolton. We're one of the asylum reception centres.
You are indeed, yes, much to the annoyance of a lot of people in Bolton. But both of you, thank you very much. John Falster, the North of England coordinator, have rejoined the EU party, and as well, political commentator Suzanne Evans. That debate covered far more than anyone ever anticipated. Anyway, there we go. You're with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News. Coming up in the next hour, I've got it all for you, ladies and gentlemen. We'll be returning to that hot topic. Oh, gosh, we're also going to be giving you the update as well on the tragic case of missing dog walker Nicola. All right, all of that on your way. Much more.
Alex Deakin here with your latest weather update. The weekend is almost upon us, and many of us will have a dry one. There will be some rain on Saturday, and it'll be a cloudy and mild day, whereas Sunday turns a bit colder, but much, much sunnier. Back to the rest of today. High pressure in control across the south. This weather front, though, has been chugging its way across northern Britain, still providing a little bit of rain here and there across the Pennines in particular and through the Northern Isles during this evening. But for most, it's dry, some drizzle at times in western areas, but I say most places not seeing any rain overnight. We'll keep a lot of cloud, and that will keep things mild. Temperatures in the east may drop down to 4 or 5 Celsius, but for most of us, we start the weekend at 7 or 8 degrees. So a mild start to Saturday, fairly drab starts, but most places dry across England and Wales. Here's some rain coming in, though, initially to the northwest of Scotland, and then it will spread its way southwards towards Glasgow and Belfast by lunchtime, and then drifting towards Edinburgh and across southern Scotland later on. The far northwest may turn a bit brighter later. For most of England and Wales, it will be dry, cloudy. Some breaks in the cloud, a bit of brightness coming through. It will be mild, double digits almost across the board. Some of that rain will push into northern England and North Wales on Saturday evening, but it's fizzling out all the while as it works its way further south, and that band of rain out of the way by Sunday. It is introducing colder air and clearer conditions as well, so the blue hue on the chart, it is going to turn frosty for much of northern Britain as we head into Sunday. So a very different day on Sunday. It will be a bit colder first thing with a frost, but a sparkling day of winter sunshine by and large. A bit of a breeze perhaps for Norfolk and at times across the Western Isles, but for most, light winds, plenty of sunshine. Temperatures won't be as high because we've got colder air coming in, but these numbers are about average for the time of year, and with light winds in the sunshine, it'll feel fairly pleasant. Enjoy your weekend.
He's the king of breakfast TV, and he's back.
Eamon Holmes, back on the TV
Surprised
with me this morning.
Even remember my name.
I know, it's been 4 months. You have holy water by your bed?
Oh, yes. Already to bless.
Yeah. Oh, Eamon. Oh.
Why do you not believe anything I say?
Eamon Holmes back on GB News Breakfast at 6 a.m.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's just gone 5 o'clock. You're with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News. Coming up, earlier this afternoon, Superintendent of Lancashire Police confirmed authorities' main hypothesis in the case of missing mother Nicola Bulley is that she fell into the river. In a press conference, Sally Riley said the case is not suspicious but a tragic case of a missing person. Earlier today, Bulley's partner said that her disappearance was like a dream, a bad dream, and that he can't get his head around any of it. We'll bring you the latest developments in that really bizarre case next. In other news, the Home Office has shelved plans to house hundreds of migrants in a Pontins holiday camp. Is local opposition now working? I will be asking, should there be local referendums on migrant hotels? We've just had a debate on it. We'll have another one very, very shortly. It's also emerged that there's been an alarming rise in the number of Indian people crossing the Channel. We'll examine what that really means next. And the disgraced pop star Gary Glitter has been freed from jail early. He was let out after serving just half of his 16-year sentence. The 78-year-old was originally jailed for abusing 3 schoolgirls. We'll speak to a lawyer representing one of Glitter's victims, and that is coming your way shortly as well. Get in touch, gbviews@gbnews.uk. Should there be local referendums on migrant hotels? That's what I want to know. But now, here's your headlines.
Good evening, it's 5:01. I'm Aaron Armstrong in the GB newsroom. Lancashire Police investigating the disappearance of a missing mother now believes she fell into the river. Nicola Bulley disappeared a week ago walking her dog. Police say there's a 10-minute window that's unaccounted for. The 45-year-old's phone was found on a bench, still connected to a works Teams meeting with her dog nearby, but no trace of her has been found. Superintendent Sally Riley confirmed a 1-kilometre radius has been searched from that location, along with a 15-kilometre stretch downstream.
Our main working hypothesis, therefore, is that Nicola has sadly fallen into the river, that there is no third-party or criminal involvement, and that this is not suspicious, but a tragic case of a missing person. This is particularly important because speculation otherwise can be really distressing for the family and for Nicola's children.
Well, Nicola's partner, Paul Ansell, says he's focusing on staying strong for their 2 daughters and hopes people will come forward with new information.
Every single scenario comes to a brick wall, every single one of them. And then all we're doing is sitting there going round and round and round, going through every scenario, and then go back to the first scenario again, and do the whole thing again, and it's just all day long. That's all we're doing. That's all we're doing.
The community is also coming together to help find the missing mortgage advisor. They're appealing for anyone with information to come forward, hoping images of Nicola will help jog people's memories.
All week there've been searches going on with the local community. Everybody's really kind of come together to try and do everything they can to find her and bring her home to her family. It's just, we're keeping eyes out for dash cams, anyone that could possibly have been here this time last week.
I just feel like I've got to stand here and do my bit, even if it's just stood here holding a sign up.
A man who brought a crossbow to Windsor Castle with the intention of harming Queen Elizabeth has pleaded guilty to a charge under the Treason Act. Jaswant Singh Child was arrested on the grounds of the castle on Christmas Day in 2021, carrying a weapon which was loaded with the safety catch released and ready to fire. The 21-year-old told a protection officer, "I'm here to kill the Queen." The late Queen was in residence at the time. Disgraced pop star Gary Glitter's been freed from jail after serving half of his 16-year sentence for sex offences. The 79-year-old was jailed in 2015 for sexually abusing 3 schoolgirls. Glitter, who left a low-security prison in Dorset, will now be subject to licence conditions. The Royal College of Nursing has joined ambulance workers in Wales in cancelling planned strikes for next week, following a new pay offer from the Welsh Government. Rail services, though, are being disrupted today, with train drivers walking out for the second time this week. RMT and ASLEF union members are demanding better pay and conditions. Rail operators say there are severe delays with no trains running at all in some areas. The General Secretary of ASLEF, Mick Whelan, says the union wants talks to continue to find a solution.
Quite deceitfully, the RDG put out a protocol which they led for a pay offer over 2 years that hadn't been discussed with this trade union, hadn't been through the framework agreement that we'd agreed with them to allow some sort of national talks to take place in our fractionalised industry, and it's probably set the whole process back months and months. If they want to negotiate via the media, I'll tell you what I want, and then you can relay it to them. They can come and talk to us in a few weeks' time. But we don't behave like that. We behave honourably. So we'll go back into talks on Tuesday in the hope that trust can be rebuilt and we can find a way forward.
The anti-Brexit campaigner Gina Miller has become the latest person to accuse the Deputy Prime Minister of bullying. She says Dominic Raab launched an abusive attack and was aggressive and intimidating during an encounter in 2016. A source close to the Justice Secretary described the claims as malicious and baseless, saying they were timed to jump on a political bandwagon. And the US Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, has postponed his trip to China after an alleged Chinese spy balloon was tracked flying across the United States. It's been described as a civilian airship by China. The country claims it deviated from its planned route. Well, a decision was taken by the US not to shoot it down because the debris could pose a safety risk. China says it will continue to maintain communication with the US to properly handle the situation. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. But now, it's back to Patrick.
Welcome back, ladies and gents. It's about to go 7 minutes past 5. You're with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News. Now, police in Lancashire have revealed that they believe missing mother Nicola Bulley fell into the River Wyre. A major search for Miss Bulley continues after she went missing a week ago, but no trace of her has been found. GB News' national reporter Theo Chicomba has the latest for us.
Well, this afternoon we heard from Lancashire Police's Superintendent Sally Riley about the latest in their investigations looking into the disappearance of Nicola Bulley here in Lancashire. They say they are working on a working hypothesis, which is Nicola has fallen. There's no third party involved, and this is not suspicious, and it's a tragic case of a missing person. They also believe that she remained in this riverside area where her dog and her phone were found. They're also saying if anybody has any dashcam footage or CCTV footage which will be useful in their investigations, please do get in touch. This morning, some of her community members but also friends were out on the main road holding placards saying if you do have any dashcam footage, please do get in touch and get in touch with 101. They still aren't able to account for a 10-minute window. This is from Lancashire Police of around 20 past 9, and they say they're still working on what happened during that time period leading up to Nicola's disappearance. The search continues into the weekend, and at the moment they say they don't have a time frame of how long this is going to go on for. So for here in Lancashire, the investigations and search continues.
Theo, thank you, Theo Chicomba, there, our national reporter. With me in the studio now is former Met Detective Peter Blexley. Peter, great to have you back in. I think we spoke a couple of days ago. It might have been yesterday. It's all a blur, actually, isn't it? But about the developments in this case, I think a lot of people, certainly I, when we found out that a press conference was going to be called by the police, we feared the worst, possibly. That wasn't the case. They are still, it would appear, none the wiser, despite the astonishing amount of resources that have been pumped into this.
Yeah, it was very interesting. What we heard about was how they checked every route, both into the river and out, every path, every driveway, and all of that. And they've examined a lot of doorbell footage, other CCTV footage. And of course, when you get a negative sighting on a CCTV camera, you don't see the person you're looking for. That can be equally as helpful as a positive sighting, because you suddenly go, right, we can discount that route. That person did not go down that route. And by a process of elimination, this is exactly what Lancashire Police have done. There was only one route that they can't be exactly certain on, and that was Garston Lane, which leads onto a main A road. And they did ask if anybody's got any dash cam footage or anything similar that covers Garston Lane between, shall we say, 9 and 9:30 of Friday 1 week ago, then please get in touch with the police.
Yeah, indeed. And that is that process of elimination that's led them down that route, or really led them to believe that she did just go into the water.
Because they've tried every other avenue. They've clearly deployed many, many resources to this, not just the search of the river. And let's remember, they said today there's 15 kilometres of river potentially that they've got to search. So that's over 9 miles. That's a lot of river that varies in depth from 18 inches to 18 feet. So clearly they've got quite a mammoth task on their hands. But yes, throughout this process of elimination, they're saying our working hypothesis is that, unfortunately, Nicola must have gone into the river.
In your experience, cases similar-ish to this anyway, how long will a search of this scale go on, do you think?
This will go on for some considerable time because, of course, we have a distraught family, friends and a community that will be deeply affected by this. So all the resources that have been deployed for the last week, I'm sure, are not thinking about being stood down anytime soon. They will keep going with this. Superintendent Riley almost alluded to that by saying they had plans for the weekend, so I'm sure that's other stretches of river, and they will go on, I'm sure, until every single scrap, inch, drop of water has been searched as best they can.
And the resources at their disposal are quite remarkable, actually. She mentioned things like using sonar and all of this stuff to try to find a body in the water. And did you, I don't want to make you sound tall, did you have all of this at your disposal in your day?
No, we most certainly did not. Drones came many, many years after I'd left the police. And, of course, today we heard about not only drones in the sky, but underwater drones. So every bit of modern technology they did. The one thing she didn't mention, which I would have liked to have heard from, is they mentioned that they're talking to academics about tidal flows and all of that. I'm sure they must have spoken to the gillies or the water bailiffs, the people that look after the river, basically, that will enforce fishing rights, for example, if they exist, because those people know their stretches of river like nobody else. But I'm sure they must have spoken to them.
Absolutely. Look, I've just got to touch on this because, as one would imagine, the family, and in fact Nicola's partner alluded to this earlier, they keep going round in circles and round in circles, and everything's a dead end at the minute. Everything's a completely closed avenue for them. You can keep seeing these different hypotheses that come. The police absolutely convinced, it would seem, that she's sadly fallen into the river. The family were coming out earlier on and saying somebody must know something. In this case, unfortunately, it's looking quite likely that nobody does know anything.
At the moment, quite possibly. And, of course, the police went to great lengths to say that speculation is unhelpful and, in fact, very distressing for the family, and I completely understand why they would have said that. Yeah, it's a huge task. It must be just a living hell for the family, and let's hope they get some resolution.
Peter, thank you very much, as ever, especially for coming into the studio. Much appreciated. Peter Blacksley, the former Met detective, just shedding some more insight on what will be taking place now in the search for Nicola Bulley. Sadly, went missing 7 days ago today. None the wiser, we had a press conference earlier on. The police, Lancashire Police, pretty convinced that she fell into the water. As it stands anyway, many, many, many more questions than answers. But we're moving away from that story for now because Rishi Sunak has vowed to deport migrants arriving in the UK without valid documents within days. Lots of you rightly saying, well, he can't do that unless we leave the ECHR, which is why we had a big debate on the ECHR just a little bit earlier on, and why our People's Poll reveals that, well, by a fine margin, but a margin nonetheless, the vast majority of people, sorry, I should say the vast majority, a small majority of people think that we should leave the ECHR. Now, the pledge comes after the government abandoned plans to house asylum seekers in a Pontins holiday park in Merseyside. It's understood that a number of objections to the plans were raised, including logistical concerns over access to the site and the impact on local tourism. Joining us now is, crucially, a councillor from Southport. It's Tony Brough, who is the Deputy Leader of Conservative Group at Sefton Council. Great to have you on the show. Thank you very much. Your initial thoughts, then, about this Pontins no longer being used?
Well, we're relieved, I suppose, but we haven't had any official confirmation of that situation. We've heard and been told, but there's no official confirmation.
Yeah, indeed, it's all word of mouth. But the fact is, as well, it takes you quite a while to get official confirmation that these places are being used. From some of the reports that I've done in other areas, they tend to get landed with them and told about them later.
There was little or no consultation whatsoever with local people, with local councillors, or even with our MP. The situation occurred. We reacted to it because clearly we felt it was inappropriate at the time, largely because of the impact on local services and particularly for if there are children involved, then the needs of those children have to be met. And we didn't feel that Sefton had the resources to meet those needs.
No, exactly. Now, when it comes to this particular site, the Pontins site, I would imagine it's a little bit of a goldmine, especially in the summers for local tourism, is it not? Would your area have missed out significantly if this had been used to house asylum seekers?
Well, I think the area would have missed out as regards tourism, because tourism is what Southport's about. We have lots and lots of guests and visitors all year round, but particularly in the summer, and they make a big difference to the visitor economy for Southport. So yes, we would have lost out on that.
Well, can I ask you, Tony, you must have, every area has, but you must have a lot of needy people in and around the Southport area, in and around the Sefton area, the homeless, people who may be homeless military veterans, for example. Presumably, you would have been much more inclined to support a government scheme looking to house them at a Pontins, I would have thought, than maybe some of these people. Your views?
I think at any time, any proposal could be looked at, but certainly we need to be aware of it. So there would have to be proper consultation, and people need homes. So I don't think there's a blanket no to anybody. We entertain over 2,000 to 3,000 people a week at Pontins during the height of the summer. Anyway, so it's not unusual for us to have people who are accommodated at Pontins. What is difficult is when these people are introduced without any formal consultation or advice.
Could you not go ahead and do a bit of local consultation, easy for me to say, yourself now, and then stick that to the Home Office in case they try it on again in the future? Could you not do a local referendum on whether or not people want sites like the Pontins used to house asylum seekers?
I think we possibly could do that, but that in itself is a little divisive and perhaps a little unfair. You know, with the proper support and services and a proper organised method of dealing with these people, then maybe there's a possibility that they could come, or the group. It really probably isn't a blanket no from the people of Ainsdale or Southport to say we don't want these people. We attract visitors all year round.
Well, but yes, I get what you're saying, absolutely, and I completely wholeheartedly understand that you certainly don't want to paint your area in a negative light, because it isn't. I happen to know it rather well, actually. I've been there several times, especially when I was younger. I've enjoyed it, and it's a lovely part of the world, and the people there are incredibly welcoming, and it is a lovely place. There are some differences, though, as I'm sure you will acknowledge, between housing, well, people, tourists in Pontins, and housing people who, I dare say, we don't always know exactly who they are and where they're from. Would there have been cultural concerns? We've heard it from other areas where a significant proportion of people from other parts of the world overnight get dropped into your part of the world. Would there not be maybe concerns about cultural issues arising there?
there'll be a lot of issues and a lot of concerns, you're right. There's a difference between people transiently visiting Pontins in Ainsdale for a summer holiday and actually accommodating a number of people who may have travelled from overseas, may not have language available to them, who may not have had significant medical care, and then there's the issue of education for children. So all of the services in Southport would be put under pressure, but we don't know how that pressure would be sorted until they're here, and so that would be a concern to all residents, I'm sure.
OK, all right, Tony, just one more quick one with you, if that's all right. Do you know why, if indeed it is true, I mean, it is strongly suggested that this is true, that the Home Office has decided not to use Pontins. I mean, do you have any idea exactly why that is? I mean, were you personally, as a local councillor, quite strong against this? Did you say, look, you can't just drop this on us?
Oh, it was a shock to find that the proposal was to drop it on us without any warning. But having said that, all of these things can be considered. I think there was a huge amount of lobbying from our MP, who obviously has the ear of government, so that's hugely helpful. And really, the issue is not saying no to asylum seekers, it's saying, how are we going to cope?
Yeah, exactly, and that has been echoed in numerous parts, and I think it adds another development to it, doesn't it, as well, which is places like Maidenhead and Windsor, etc., where they wake up one morning and there's essentially these people who are arriving and they're saying, well, hang on a minute, our local MP used to be the Home Secretary, our local MP used to be the Prime Minister up in Maidenhead, actually, and she's still none the wiser. It just begged the question what's going on in other parts of the country. Tony, thank you very much. Tony Bruff there is the Deputy Leader of the Conservative group in Sefton Council, and that is the story, that the Pontins in Southport will not now be used to house asylum seekers. That was going to be used for asylum seeker accommodation. Yes, I just wonder whether or not you in your area would back some kind of local referendum to say, just in case one day the Home Office says, well, we're planning on plonking an asylum seeker hotel in your area, maybe your local council would have the facts there in front of them and go, well, actually, 80% of our people agree or disagree with it, and then whether or not it would make more sense then to focus the relocation schemes in areas of the country where people were banging in favour of it. Maybe they would be afraid of what they'd find out. I dare say they probably would be. GBViews at gbnews.uk. Coming up, the rail network has ground to a halt again today as drivers strike for the second time this week. So, how much more of this will the public accept? I will speak to media legend Kelvin McKenzie about that very, very shortly. I wonder which side he's on. Now then, we've got your weather.
Alex Deakin here with your latest weather update. The weekend is almost upon us and many of us will have a dry one. There will be some rain on Saturday and it'll be a cloudy and mild day, whereas Sunday turns a bit colder but much, much sunnier. Back to the rest of today. High pressure in control across the south. This weather front, though, has been chugging its way across northern Britain, still providing a little bit of rain here and there across the Pennines in particular and through the Northern Isles during this evening. But for most, it's dry, some drizzle at times in western areas, but I say most places not seeing any rain overnight. We'll keep a lot of cloud and that will keep things mild. Temperatures in the east may drop down to 4 or 5 Celsius, but for most of us, we start the weekend at 7 or 8 degrees. So a mild start to Saturday, fairly drab starts, but most places dry across England and Wales. Here's some rain coming in, though, initially to the northwest of Scotland, and then it will spread its way southwards towards Glasgow and Belfast by lunchtime, and then drifting towards Edinburgh and across southern Scotland later on. The far northwest may turn a bit brighter later. For most of England and Wales, it will be dry, cloudy. Some breaks in the cloud, a bit of brightness coming through. It will be mild, double digits almost across the board. Some of that rain will push into northern England and North Wales on Saturday evening, but it's fizzling out all the while as it works its way further south, and that band of rain out of the way by Sunday. It is introducing colder air and clearer conditions as well, so the blue hue on the chart, it is going to turn frosty for much of northern Britain as we head into Sunday. So a very different day on Sunday. It will be a bit colder first thing with a frost, but a sparkling day of winter sunshine by and large. A bit of a breeze perhaps for Norfolk and at times across the Western Isles, but for most, light winds, plenty of sunshine. Temperatures won't be as high because we've got colder air coming in, but these numbers are about average for the time of year, and with light winds in the sunshine, it'll feel fairly pleasant. Enjoy your weekend. Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
He's the king of breakfast TV, and he's back. Eamon Holmes, back on the TV
Surprised
with me this morning.
even remember my name.
I know, it's been 4 months. You have holy water by your bed?
Oh, yes.
Oh, good.
Already to bless.
Oh, Eamon. Oh.
Why do you not believe anything I say?
Eamon Holmes back on GB News Breakfast at 6 a.m.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind, and we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you. Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
and right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView, Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
OK, well, let's handle the rail strikes in the way that only we can, ladies and gentlemen. As train drivers have been striking for the second time this week, members of ASLEF and the RMT unions have walked out over an ongoing dispute to do with pay and conditions, but let's be honest, it's mostly about pay. Services have been severely disrupted, with little to no trains running in some parts of the country, although, given the way that the service has been in recent years, it's often hard to tell. Kelvin Mackenzie joins me now, the former editor of The Sun. Kelvin, thank you very much. Public sympathy is starting to wane when it comes to train drivers, who many believe are already on a pretty good wedge.
Well, the reality is they've just been offered 8% over 2 years, which will mean that they will be, on average, the ASLEF drivers will be on $65,000 a year. I don't know about you. I would have thought 65,000 basically for sitting there and moving your hand very slowly up and down like that for perhaps at maximum about 5 hours a day is not all that onerous. And I would have thought that I actually think that Rishi Sunak, now this is a unique thing to say, is actually playing an absolute blinder against the public sector workers. What we have learned to do is to get on without they're being trained. And all that's happening is that these, Whelan and co, all they're doing is they are beggaring their own members. Their own members will not want this dispute, but most of these people are politically motivated who run unions because they've got nothing else to do except talk to other socialists all day long, and therefore they think that they are actually damaging our lives. They are damaging rail networks, that's for sure, and they are damaging some committed travellers. But by and large, everybody, and thanks to technology, is getting around this issue. Technology and cars mean we're not being defeated.
Well, they are. I mean, even if we really had to push it, probably I could have even done this show from home. The fact is the vast majority of people can work from home. You are doing yours from, well, home, someone's home.
I'm at home, or I could do it from my office, which is just down the road, so they're not damaging me. They are damaging some people, but what is strange is that they're probably damaging actually very poor people. How do cleaners and co get around anymore? I mean, it's really terrible, and I have no sympathy. And what I can't, so the next movement, were I running the rail networks, is probably not a good idea as far as ASLEF drivers are concerned. I would seek there to reverse the pain and have a lockout and lock them down. Because remember, Whelan has said today that he expects this dispute, and I don't disagree with him, by the way, he's not going to win it, to go on to 2026. Well, that's 3 years. Why don't we say, I tell you what, matey, we've changed the rules on this. We are shutting the joint down. And if you guys want to come back to work that one day, that's fine. What seems to have happened is that the customers can get on without you.
Yeah, another interesting way of doing it, if Rishi Sunak is saying, and I do believe him on this, is we just can't as a nation afford all of the different public sector pay rises all at once or at all. We just can't. Make Mick Lynch and Mike Whelan choose between giving their own people a pay rise or nurses. And I'll be really intrigued to see, why can't they pit union against union?
Well, actually, in a funny way, I think he has actually, and this is where I congratulate Rishi Sunak, and I do congratulate him. He may not have a lot of strength, but he has in this. I think he's actually pitched the country against public sector workers. I mean, these imbalances, at the moment, it's running about 70-30 against the railway guys. When the public realise that the rail drivers have turned down 65,000 a year, which, I know it doesn't come anywhere near what you make, Patrick, but for ordinary people, I would have thought that was quite a lot of money.
I do think that Rishi Sunak should maybe stand up and say, right, this is the current state of the nation's finances in terms of public sector pay offers. This is what was offered them. This is what they're all on. If you have a look at it, ladies and gentlemen, what I'll do now is I'll say that nurses at the lower end, say, or teaching assistants right at the lower end, or your cleaners on trains, etc., we'll give them a bit of a pay offer. But actually, everybody else can swivel and the nation can't afford it. And then maybe just expose them to the nation like that. Do you think that Mick Lynch and the likes of Mike Whelan are prepared for their own members to go under in order for their own egos to not suffer?
I think it's been going on, the disputes now have been going on in the railways for so long now that they can't afford to lose face. So a friend of mine was at a meeting in the city of really big wigs the other night at dinner. And these are people who place billions of bets. You know, they're massively important to our country. Not one of them was going to invest in the UK over the next 3 to 5 years. No. Every single penny was going to go into the United States. To me, this reminds me of because I'm a good bit older than you guys and probably a good bit older than your audience, right? This reminds me so much of the late 70s, and I really feel sorry for our country. We have got this rail dispute going on. It will go on all summer. They are not going to win. No. For the first time, they are going to be defeated.
Kelvin, very quickly and very finally, do you think that one thing that this is exposed, I mean, we're even talking about potentially consultants at hospitals who are on about 80 odd grand a year. They're even talking about going on strike, for goodness sake. Do you think what this is exposing is how many, A, selfish people there are and how many people who, B, hate Britain?
I definitely think that social media has created a sense that everybody is entitled actually to 150 grand a year on a 2-day week, and that everybody does a very important job. Your money is defined by what somebody's prepared to pay. The taxpayer is not going to pay the rail drivers. You have lost. Thank you. Good night.
Kelvin, thank you and good evening. Kelvin Mackenzie there, former editor of The Sun. Doesn't hold back, does he? You're with me, Patrick Christys on GB News. There are reports that people from India now make up the third largest group of people crossing the Channel. That's this year. What do you make of that, ladies and gentlemen? We're getting stuck into it very, very shortly, but now it's your headlines.
It is 5:34. Good evening to you. I'm Aaron Armstrong in the GB newsroom. Lancashire Police investigating the disappearance of a missing mother of two say their main working hypothesis is she fell into the River Wire. Nicola Bulley disappeared a week ago walking her dog. Police say there's a 10-minute window that's unaccounted for. The 45-year-old's phone was found on a bench with her dog nearby. Superintendent Sally Riley confirmed a 1-kilometre radius has been searched near the location, along with a 15-kilometre stretch downstream to the sea.
Our main working hypothesis, therefore, is that Nicola has sadly fallen into the river, that there is no third-party or criminal involvement, and that this is not suspicious, but a tragic case of a missing person. This is particularly important because speculation otherwise can be really distressing for the family and for Nicola's children.
A man who was carrying a crossbow when he broke into the grounds of Windsor Castle on Christmas Day in 2021 has admitted trying to harm the Queen. A 21-year-old Jaswant Singh Chahal pleaded guilty to 3 charges, including an offence under the Treason Act. His crossbow was loaded with bolts and had the safety catch released. The late Queen was in residence at the time. Disgraced pop star Gary Glitter has been freed from jail after serving half of a 16-year sentence for sex offences. The 79-year-old was jailed in 2015 for sexually abusing 3 schoolgirls. Glitter left a low-security prison in Dorset earlier and will now be subject to licence conditions. TV online and DAB Plus Radio, this is GB News. Don't go anywhere. Patrick will be back in just a moment.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank. My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even some ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless, and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
OK, ladies and gents, very shortly we're going to be talking about what's been going on in the channel. It turns out that there appears to be a rather interesting increase in the number of Indian citizens trying to come across the channel and claim asylum. We're going to be talking about why that is and whether or not now increasingly Britain is just becoming a plot of land where the world can just come and live willy-nilly. We'll be talking about all of that. But before that, disgraced pop star Gary Glitter has been freed from jail after serving just half of his 16-year sentence. The 78-year-old, who had a string of hits in the 70s, was jailed in 2015 for sexually abusing 3 schoolgirls. And let's be honest, he has a rap sheet as long as your arm, doesn't he? Joining me now is a lawyer who's representing one of Gary Glitter's victims. With me now is Richard Scorer, Head of Abuse Law at Slater and Gordon Lawyers. Thank you very much for coming on the show. Great to have you on. The fact that Gary Glitter has been allowed out early, I think will shock people. Your views?
Well, it should shock people. I think it's wrong. I mean, it's how the system works. If you have a determinate sentence under the law that applies to him, then you're released on licence halfway through in most situations. I think that's wrong. I think it offends against the principle of justice, and it's particularly wrong because the idea of releasing people early is about trying to rehabilitate them. But this man will never be rehabilitated. I mean, he's never shown any remorse for his crimes. He's never apologised. He's never even admitted actually that he did these things that he was convicted for. And he probably represents a continuing danger to the public. So I think it does offend against people's sense of justice that he gets this early release. But that's how the law works, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the police will say and the justice authorities will say he's under very strict licensing conditions. Yeah, OK, I think a lot of people will be of the mind that if you commit crimes, especially against children, that, well, maybe even go as far as to say a lifetime in prison isn't quite enough. I think we all know what I'm alluding to there. However, Richard, are the victims lost in all of this?
I think they are, and I spoke to my client earlier today, and she was finding this very difficult and very, very distressing. It was a very hard day for her, and what she said to me was, this man gave me a life sentence, of trauma and nightmares and the post-traumatic stress disorder that she has, and for very, very serious abuse. I mean, the worst kind of abuse that you can imagine. When she was 12, and she does feel forgotten in all of this. She said that early release like this, it devalues the experience of people like her. She was promised justice, and she doesn't feel that this gives it to her.
No, I can only imagine how she must be feeling, and it is absolutely horrific. And you look at someone like Gary Glitter, and there's been serious question marks about his behaviour in Cambodia, Vietnam, more than question marks. Obviously, situations over here, and you really drill down into some of the cases as well. As you said there, your client was 12. I understand that one of them was as young as 10 years old as well.
That's right.
And you've hit the nail on the head, I think, when you talk about rehabilitation. You do not believe that he is capable of being rehabilitated, which, if we take that to his natural conclusion, means that he will, in your view, always pose a threat to society. Locked away forever, then, in your view, should he be?
Well, he should certainly serve the full sentence in prison that he was given back in 2015, and I think that that's the most offensive thing, is the idea that you get out halfway through. But he does represent, in my view, a continuing risk. I mean, the probation service, of course, will say that they will manage that risk, that he will have licence conditions attached, but. I think it is very difficult for victims to see somebody like this released out into the community. Indeed. And fundamentally be at liberty, be subject to conditions.
Yeah. Now, can I just broaden this out a little bit, actually, because it's all very well and good talking about Gary Glitter, and that name in itself gets the headlines, OK? But actually, if this is happening with someone like Gary Glitter, how many convicted paedophiles and horrific sex offenders are just out walking the streets at the minute?
I couldn't give you an absolute number, but the fact is, as you'll be aware, that most people who commit serious sex offences don't get life sentences. I mean, that does occasionally happen, but the vast majority don't. And then, of course, as with Glitter, there will be release halfway through, albeit on licence. So, I mean, the reality is that there will be a lot of people walking the streets who have committed serious sex offences, who've served prison terms for them, but have then been released. I mean, that is the reality that we have as a society. And, of course, for victims, that is a very, very difficult thing to deal with.
I can only imagine. Look, Richard, thank you very, very much. And we won't go into, obviously, any huge amounts of specifics of your client. There are several ongoing issues there, as I understand it, so we'll leave that be for now. But, Richard, thank you. Much appreciated to have your insights and your intellect on this particular topic on the show. Richard Scorer there, Head of Abuse Law at Slater and Gordon Lawyers. And, yeah, it's not just about Gary Glitter, is it, really? It's about the wider picture, the bigger picture, the fact that people who can commit very, very, very serious and multiple offences against children can serve what some would argue is a minuscule amount of time in a prison. And it was a low-security prison at that as well. Anyway, we're moving on from Gary Glitter now. The Home Office have revealed that people from India now make up the third largest group of migrants who have crossed the Channel this year. The Times reported that around 250 Indian migrants arrived in small boats so far, a fifth of the nearly 1,200 that have crossed this year. But what this means in terms of a point of difference is that number, 250, is around 3 times higher than it was this time last year. Officials believe that Indian students are taking advantage of a loophole in asylum rules, which allows asylum seekers to pay domestic tuition fees rather than international fee rate. Joining me now is international human rights lawyer David Haig. David, thank you very, very much. Great to have you on the show. Why are we offering asylum to anyone from India?
Well, exactly. I mean, as you said, what we've seen now is that an increase in the numbers. And it's something, obviously, they are facts, and the Home Office have given us reasons/excuses to why that has happened. And one of them is that they've made a comment that changes in law in Serbia, essentially stopping the visa-free entry for Indians, means that the numbers have gone up. And the other being obviously related to that, and the fact that they are now suggesting that Indian students that come into the country, rather than going the normal route, which would cost them £25,000, £30,000 in terms of tuition fees, are instead seeing perhaps that it's easier to risk their life and pay maybe £4,000 or £5,000 and come across on boats.
What I don't understand is why it's easier for them, because one would have thought that if you're claiming to be from Afghanistan or you're claiming to be from some war-torn hellhole, that, yeah, it might be worth the payoff because you could get here and you'd be granted asylum. But if it turns out that you're just a middle-class member of Indian family over there somewhere, why on earth would we give you asylum anyway?
Well, absolutely. I mean, we saw last year when, in the short period of time when Liz Truss was Prime Minister, when she was trying to negotiate a trade deal with India, a little bit of a spat between her and the Home Secretary, who said that the Indian are the highest group of overstayers from legitimate visas in the UK. That caused a bit of a spat. Now, that obviously is a fact, and it's something that I remember going back probably even quite a while ago when I was a trainee lawyer. It was, as you mentioned earlier, I think in your programme, somewhat of a scam where there were Indian private universities and private English tuition cases where they would come over as students and overstay. And that's something that I saw, maybe 20 years ago. It's still happening. And now, clearly, they are now seeing that it's easier for illegal migrants from India to come that way, because effectively the complete incompetence of the government in terms of immigration has thrown open the gates.
Well, this is it. But if you weigh it all up, we've got a lot of people who we don't know who they are or where they're from. We had that horrific case of an individual who was found guilty of murdering 2 people at close range with an AK-47 in Serbia not so long ago. Drug offences as well in, I believe, Norway and Italy, allowed to wander in pretty freely. But on top of that, now, OK, we've just got people who are not coming from as far as we can tell, escaping any kind of persecution, whether that's in Albania or in India. I was quite surprised to learn as well a bit earlier in the programme that we have a huge amount of overstayers from Australia and Canada as well. It is painting a picture of England, or the UK, I should say, on the world stage being regarded as an unbelievably soft touch.
Well, exactly. And you've got to blame the current government for its consistent and continuing failure to actually look like we're a country that protects our borders. So anyone and everyone seems to be coming to England at the moment. And I can't see, even with the many, many promises from Rishi Sunak, which we heard with all the other prime ministers, that that's going to change anytime soon, because, of course, there's a general election coming.
Yes, indeed. Just on the ECHR angle as well, you are, of course, a human rights lawyer. Do you foresee there being massive, massive concerns about the UK leaving the ECHR? Just because Rishi Sunak today, or yesterday, I should say, came out and said, oh, look, I'm vowing to deport these people within days. Right, OK. Then he's saying, I promise you, flight's going to take off to Rwanda. Right, OK. We're going to reduce this asylum seeker backlog. I don't see how he does all of this stuff without getting us out the ECHR. What's your take on how likely that is?
Exactly the same with the Rwanda policy. There are going to be clear issues with existing UK law and the ECHR with that policy. So unless they change either the policy or the existing laws, it's not going to be doable. And like I said, the general election's coming, so I just don't see how that can be done or avoid challenges in the time that's left.
I'm trying to figure out what he's playing at, really, because he's obviously, Rishi Sunak, for all of his flaws, is obviously a very intelligent guy. I mean, clearly, that shines through. And I think there's a lot more about him, actually, than what comes across sometimes in his teleprompted speeches. I think he has got quite a bit about him. But when he's saying stuff like stop the boats and these very definite things, I'm sitting here thinking, well, how are you actually going to do this? Because you must be aware of what you're saying. It's quite a finite thing. But, Dr. David, thank you very, very much. It's great to have you on the show. David Haig there, international human rights lawyer. Right, moving on now. An SNP frontbencher has repeatedly refused to say if a transgender double rapist is a man or a woman. I'm just going to read that again and we'll let it sink in. An SNP frontbencher has repeatedly refused to say if a transgender double rapist is a man or a woman. SNP Transport Minister Jenny Gilruth was questioned by Question Time audience members about the gender of trans rapist Isla Bryson, but she consistently referred to the rapist as the individual. Nicola Sturgeon's party is once again under intense scrutiny over its stance on the transgender debate. And there are increasing rumblings that Nicola Sturgeon may well fall on her sword over this, how she met her match with this ludicrous big woke transgender nonsense. With me now is Austin Sheridan, former SNP Glasgow City Councillor. Great to have you back on the show. OK, so is the individual who was a convicted rapist and sent to a woman's prison a man or a woman?
Well, I don't know the individual, so I would know the answer to that question. What I do know is the individual in question is a rapist and committed one of the most heinous crimes that you can towards anyone. And they should face the full extent of the law. I believe that the Scottish Prison Service have been due diligent in their duties in ensuring that the prison population are safe. And I believe they came to the correct decision. What I'm not going to do.
I'll tell you, if you're not willing to tell me that this individual with a penis is a man, right? Can I just ask you, Austin, are you a man or a woman?
It's not that I'm not willing to do so, it's that I don't know the answer to that question. What I can say is that people from all walks of life and people from all different backgrounds, whether they be black, whether they be gay, whether they be transgender, people can commit crimes. There are bad people, unfortunately, across all sections of society.
But that's a different conversation. No one's saying that people don't. Can I ask, are you a man or a woman?
Well, I identify as a man, and I'm
what makes you a man?
But I can say that for sure because I know that.
But for you, in your personal view, in your chosen identity, what makes you a man?
Well, it's my belief. It's my gender. That's what I feel comfortable with. And anybody who chooses to identify as a alternative gender to the sex that we're born, then I'm comfortable to generally support that. What we do know about the individual that we're speaking about, and I think that we should be clear, is that whether this person is being genuine or not is certainly something that I would question, right? But I'm not in a position to decide whether that is the case or not. But to question that, I believe, as I say, I would do so.
Do you feel that there is ever a circumstance where someone who is in high office can genuinely go, please vote for me, I am a credible candidate, but I am unable to look at a man with genitalia completely intact, with a convicted of 2 rapes, and I am unable to tell you whether or not that individual is a man or a woman. That makes me seriously question whether or not that person, frankly, should be allowed to walk the streets themselves, let alone in high office.
Well, what I would say is that it's not Nicola Sturgeon or any other politician who is dealing with this individual directly. It's the Scottish Prison Service, and it's their job to make that assessment on behalf of Scottish Government ministers. Whatever conclusion that they come to, and if it does transpire that this hideous person is trying to masquerade as someone that they're not, in order to try and make their life easier, then obviously, as I say, once that's been determined, then we can say for sure. But there has been no determination made on that, and I think it's reasonable to say that transgender people can be criminals as well. We don't want them to be criminals. We don't want anyone to be a criminal. But just because they're a criminal doesn't mean they're not transgender.
OK, all right, Austin, thank you very much. Austin Sheridan there, former SNP, Glasgow City Councillor. I wish we had more time with it. To be honest, I'm just sick and tired of people coming on here and going, oh, you can't demonise all transgender people. It's absolutely not what we're doing. But what I am saying is there's a bloke over there with a penis and everything else who's raped 2 women who should be nowhere near a female prison. Anyway, sometimes I just wonder whether or not it's just me shouting into the void. Michelle, thank you very much. Get me out of this, please. What's going on with you?
I can't get you out of it, Patrick. I think it's as ludicrous as you do. This whole kind of thing where people get called names, whether it's a TERF or whatever it is, they just do it to shut down the debate, don't they? Because loads of people go, oh, I don't want to be a TERF, even though they probably don't really know what a TERF is. So then they just kind of sit there and go, yeah, definitely, that guy over there definitely is a woman. Do you know one of the things on this whole debate I can't help but ponder? Whatever happened to the concept of a transvestite?
Yeah.
Because before, it used to be that if a guy was wearing a dress, it was a person that was known as a transvestite. That seems to all but...
Well, this was the point that was made, actually, at one of the committee hearings where the individual, if she was a lawyer, said, actually, it's these days now, the term trans is encompassing a lot of these things. Michelle, I could talk...
Hey, we're going to get ourselves into trouble. Should we just leave it there, Patrick? Don't want to be called names, do we?
Absolutely, yeah. Michelle, you're going to have a great show. You're going to have to watch it to find out what's coming up. We won't tease it, but thank you very much. It's going to be a box office hour with Michelle Dewberry to kickstart your Friday evening. I'll be Patrick Christys. I'll be back 3 p.m. on Monday. Yes, it's the weekend. Woo.
Alex Deakin here with your latest weather update. The weekend is almost upon us and many of us will have a dry one. There will be some rain on Saturday and it'll be a cloudy and mild day, whereas Sunday turns a bit colder but much, much sunnier. Back to the rest of today. High pressure in control across the south. This weather front, though, has been chugging its way across northern Britain, still providing a little bit of rain here and there across the Pennines in particular and through the Northern Isles during this evening. But for most, it's dry, some drizzle at times in western areas, but I say most places not seeing any rain overnight. We'll keep a lot of cloud and that will keep things mild. Temperatures in the east may drop down to 4 or 5 Celsius, but for most of us, we start the weekend at 7 or 8 degrees. So a mild start to Saturday, fairly drab starts, but most places dry across England and Wales. Here's some rain coming in, though, initially to the northwest of Scotland, and then it will spread its way southwards towards Glasgow and Belfast by lunchtime, and then drifting towards Edinburgh and across southern Scotland later on. The far northwest